Good evening and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for the Board of Education for December 11th, 2023. For those of you in the audience who may want to follow along, you can find our agendas outside the left door, and if you turn to the right, they're on the table. There are also blue slips there for anyone who would like to address the board. Anyone watching at home who wants to follow along with us, you can go to our website, which is livoniapublicschools.org. You can highlight over the board tab and drop down to board information, and you will be able to see our agenda there. Anyone who has watched our Committee of the Whole meetings in the past knows that this is the meeting that you really want to watch to understand the issues and the matters that are going to be brought before the board for a vote at our next regular meeting, which is next Monday, the 18th. So this is the meeting that you really want to watch. If you want to dig deep, you can go back and watch our Committee of the Whole videos in the past, and it gives you a pretty good idea of where we're at. Again, welcome everyone. One of the things that we hold very dear to our heart here on the board is one of our community with characteristics, and that's respect. You'll hear us talk about that at just about every meeting that we have, and that's because it's so important to us. You will see on the board, we don't always agree with one another, but we respect each other, we listen to each other, and sometimes we change our mind because we've listened to somebody else's viewpoint. That's important to us, and we will make sure that anyone who comes before this board has our full respect, and we ask that you return that in respect to the board. We find that that's one of the best ways that we can teach our children, is respect each other. They will follow. They see it, they know what's going on, and it's the best teacher that we have. So we keep that in mind as we go through our meetings. So we will begin our agenda. Our item 1 is audience communications. I do not have any blue slips. Any blue slips out there? Mm-hmm. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 2, which is our Committee of the Whole. We have one item under our Committee of the Whole tonight, and that is the sale of property on Ann Arbor Trail. And if I talk really slow, Mr. Francis will be here with us. Good evening. Good.
Hello.
There we go. I don't have documentation. We discussed this at the study session last week. I don't have any documentation in your packet because we are still working on that purchase agreement. It's in draft form still. But I wanted to come to the board and have the conversation again to follow up the study session meeting. And basically, for obviously this will be a public meeting, as was last week's, but this one is televised. Some folks will watch this, et cetera, just so we can have it out there as well. Also, to let the board know that potentially we could have this for a vote next week. So when we get to that point at the end of this conversation of whether to put it on or not, I would say maybe we should put it on tentatively, and then I'll have it pulled off if it's not done in time. So the idea being, if at any point this week that the purchaser, the proposed purchaser, signs and gets it back to us, then I can always put that on for a vote in the December 18th meeting, if that's okay with the board. Just to give a brief recap of what we discussed last week about this, is a piece of property on Ann Arbor Trail in the city of Westland, close to where the former, for those who recall, I know everyone sitting at this table recalls, the Ford Skill Center, which is near Ritz, or on Ritz, was located on Ritz, and that would be on the north side. This property is across from that on the south side, so it is west of Merriman, and this is a piece of property that is 10.33 acres, not a property that has a school on it or even had a school on it. This is a piece of property that the district simply owns. It is currently mostly wooded. We were, just to give a quick background, we were approached, the district was approached by a developer who asked if we were interested in selling it. After conversations back and forth, we've landed on a price based upon an appraisal, a professional appraisal that the district had commissioned, and we came to an agreement on that price. And at this point, we're simply just trying to get the draft, both sides agreeing on just all the language in that draft of the purchase agreement. And again, I think we're quite close to that. It's just a matter of, as of the end of business today, we did not have that finalized or signed by the purchaser.
Okay, questions? Mrs. Burton?
More comment. Based off our conversation last week, I'm in favor of going ahead and pursuing the sale of this property for a couple of reasons. It's not a piece of property that we ever anticipate using as a school. Contrary to other properties that we have that are more centrally located throughout the district, this one is on the southern border of the district. If we ever did need another elementary school, this would not be a likely piece of property that we would use for that, because it is heavily wooded, because it has some low-lying areas to it that would not make it conducive to use for a school, and because of its location, right on the southern part of the district. If we were going to ever in the future, which is not foreseeable at this point, but if we were ever going to need property for another school building or another administration building, et cetera, we would be certainly looking to something more centrally located. So seeing as this is not a piece of property that we use now for school purposes, nor do we ever foresee using it, we have to be fiscally responsible with our resources, and those include our real estate resources. We are not a real estate holding company, so if we have land that we don't ever foresee being able to utilize for a school purpose, I'm in favor of selling it at this point.
I agree with the statements that were related to it doesn't have a school on it, it won't have a school on it. Frankly, what I didn't mention, out of the 10.33 acres, there's approximately half of it that is anticipated to be even buildable on, so we would not. So I would agree with all of those points that you made, Mrs. Bird, with regard to school facility ever being on it would not be done in the foreseeable, wouldn't really be practical. And then couldn't hurt also if we had residential to get some more students to put into our schools.
And I'll also make note that this is, as Mr. Francis said, it is almost entirely wooded. There are marshy areas in there, therefore only half of it is buildable. But it is not an area that you would drive by and see families gathering like a parkland or utilizing to play soccer. It is an area that, one, you would not even assume is owned by the district. It has been in our possession for several years and probably likely came about when we merged with the Nankin Mills area. And so this is a property that is, again, heavily wooded. It's not utilized as parkland right now or in any other way by the community. I'm sure it's a patch of land that folks drive past and probably don't give a second thought. So we certainly do know that it's ours and had a valuation on it a number of years ago, and we have been offered fair market value for that property. So we would recommend your consideration for this agreement.
And just to clarify, Mrs. Oquist is correct. We had a valuation a handful of years ago, but we did, just for anybody, community members perking up their ears with that, we had a very recent professional appraisal of it as well once we were in discussions with the sale. So we're not using something that's years old.
Other questions or comments? Mrs. Frank?
I agree with everything that's been said, and I just think it's really important to say we have a lot of buildings that are housing our students right now, and the students that are entrusted to us, and for the foreseeable future. And so I think to be able to use these funds to take care of the buildings that we do have is a really wise move for our district and for the board to be able to use those resources wisely. So I'm really glad that we're looking into this.
And I also do want to mention that we discussed at the study session that the proceeds from this, based on our board policy, would be going into the capital projects fund. So this would not be going into the general fund. As you know, our board policy states that if our fund balance is currently within the MSBO recommended range, then the board would put these funds into the capital projects fund so that we would be using a one-time revenue for a one-time expenditure. And so that is the case at this point in time. We are fortunate to be, and have certainly planned to be, within the MSBO range, so it would not be going into the general fund.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I will just note that after the study session, Mrs. Smith got us some photographs, aerial photographs of the area, and to say that this is heavily wooded is almost an understatement. It is extremely heavily wooded. And given the fact that, as Mr. Francis indicated, about half of it would only be buildable, 5 acres, that's not something that we could build on with any stretch of the imagination, with any kind of a building. So I'm in favor of this. We're going to get fair market value for it, so I think it's the appropriate decision.
I have a question just for procedurally. If it doesn't flow into the 18th voting meeting, is the board okay with it not being on a study session and not being on a committee, but just going to the
Yes.
next nearest voting meeting? Thank you.
That's
Just
fine.
want to confirm that. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this item?
President
Mrs. Byrne?
Further, if there's need for this purchase agreement to be signed sooner, I would be in favor of holding a special meeting that's either before or after one of our already scheduled study sessions or committee of the wholes in order to get that voted upon, if that is the need.
I think everybody would agree with that. We could do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Francis. That therefore concludes the committee of the whole. That takes us to item 3, our building and site. Mr. Francis isn't going anywhere as I turn it over to Mrs. Burden.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda this evening is 3A, the 2024 contractor rebids from the 2021 bond. And I will turn this over to Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much. Want to welcome Mr. Brian Weber, Plant Moran Real Point, owner's representative. We have in your packet a pretty hefty amount of paperwork there that's showing the rebids that occurred. These are the items that we brought to the board, I believe it was last month, for approval. The summer of 2024 bond renovation bid results for that package. We had a handful of items that we needed to rebid for purposes of just getting a better bid coverage on them. We had something in the mechanical that was it mechanical or electrical we broke apart? It was
Both of them.
Both,
Yes.
that we had separated out, got some more bidders on these. So we did get bid coverage on all the items that we went back out for. We feel good about the results and where we are at within our budget. And what you have here in front of you this evening finishes off that full bid package for us to go into the summer of 2024 at those 5 buildings and the pools at the 3 high schools.
Yep. Perfect.
So I will turn it over to Mr. Weber. I'll let him kind of skim over the highlights of the bids, and then we can take any questions that the board might have. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're welcome.
Touch base on a couple of other items on here, just to be specific for those at home or just to refresh everybody. The schools for the 2024 renovations include Hayes Elementary School, Hoover Elementary School, Roosevelt Elementary, Holmes Middle School, Stevenson High School, including the pool room, and then Franklin and Churchill High Schools, just the pool rooms, just so everybody's aware of the buildings we're talking about. And reiterate a little bit of what Mr. Francis said. These are the 6 remaining bid categories that we wanted to go back out, make sure we had better coverage on it, and make sure we get fair pricing. So now, this was our typical public bidding process. It was posted to the state of Michigan websites, posted in local newspapers. So those were put out in mid-November following our last bidding process. Received those in early December, and we received coverage of 2 to 3 bidders for each category, which is an improvement, and we saw competitive pricing for all of them. So it was good results to see for what we received. Flipping through, I will take you to page 3 of the packet, which shows a budget summary, as typical with what we bring in front of the board. So if you'll see, we had a budget of almost $6.7 million. Our actuals came in at 6.75. So therefore, we did have a variance of $59,000, roughly $60,000, we came in over budget. However, if you do remember last time we were in front of you last month, we were under budget, so everything came out well. It was good news for this bidding period.
Yeah, that variance is just for these 6 items.
That is correct. So hard construction costs are at the top. We roll in general conditions and CM fee that Clark Construction, it was negotiated in their contract that multiply against that. Typical 7% construction contingency as we usually bring for unforeseens and field conditions that we come across in the renovations. So the total recommendation that we're bringing in front is $7,510,209. So all in, about $66,000 over budget, once again, was offset by our savings of the last presentation. Any questions on overall dollars? And I can touch base a little bit into Clark's packet.
So overall, we're still under budget
That is
for
correct.
the summer
For the summer.
2024 projects.
That is correct.
Mrs. Frank?
Just to be clear, in all of our, we do this a lot, but I just think because it says rebid, it gives a lot of confusion. And it's why these schools are schools that are on our normal rotation, that were scheduled in our bond project, that they were on the normal rotation to get
These are the summer
renovated this summer.
2024.
Right.
Correct.
So I'm just, for the public out there, why Hayes? Why, because this was our normal schedule. We have a schedule of all schools that get renovated each summer, and this was our normal schedule. It's just the pieces that were, that we already bid on, that we wanted different coverage to see if we could get a better price, that sort of thing, right? We're not changing the scope, we're not changing the plan, other than the pools.
That is correct. The sites did not change. It was only the
Yeah.
contractors that and we'll show here, electricians, mechanical,
Right.
roofing contractors. Those contractors we wanted to rebid and not change it, but the buildings that were always scheduled.
And
Right.
just to clarify, the pools are not a change either. Those were planned
Okay.
as well.
Yeah.
The 3 high school pools were a planned part of the
Of the
bond.
bond, okay.
It just happened
And the
to-
timing, this summer.
Yeah, timing-wise, it works at this point to do the 3 pools and some adjacent work in locker rooms. That was a planned item.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Mrs. Bonnefield?
Many times we kind of rotate through the high school, so if there's, like the tennis courts, we didn't want to miss a season. So even if we're working on one high school, the kids can still do their sports. We're doing all 3 pools at the same time. Can you just address how that's going to
Yeah,
affect the
it's actually going to get
teams?
staged out similarly. So we'll go into one at a time so that not all 3 of them are out of commission altogether.
And just, the scopes vary per building. Once again, it's the same mindset for all renovations in the district. We don't go in and apply the same amount of dollars, same scope. We visually look at it to make sure we're spending smart money. So some of the schools' scope is more intrusive than others, and like Mr. Francis said, we're not going to go in and do work that will shut down these. It may be a little bit of work that we can do on off-shift hours, but it's not as if something happens that it's shut down, that they can't be in use. So we are planning that, and we'll help phase it with not only Mr. Francis' team, but the schools and athletic directors
Yeah,
as well.
the principals and specifically the 3 athletic administrators are very much involved in this particular high school pool project. Not only on the physical work itself, but on the staging and on the timing of it, because that's what they and their coaches are very interested in as well.
Would it be helpful for the board, perhaps at our January study session, to get a more detailed update for each pool room specifically, what we will be doing? I know we've talked about this, but just as a refresher, what we will be doing at each pool, and then the general staging of that. That may be helpful information, so we can add that to the January study session for the board.
We can do that.
Also, as a reminder, I mentioned this in our last meeting, but I will remind folks too, my family's company bid on a small portion of one section of this, and therefore I will be abstaining from this vote. Any other comments or questions on this item? All righty, seeing none, we will be putting this on the agenda for a vote at our next general meeting.
Please.
Next week.
Next week.
Okay. All righty. Next item is item 3B, purchase of bookshelves for LMC 2021 bond.
Thank
Mr.
you very
Francis?
much. Yes. As mentioned at the study session last week, this is something that we've done for the past couple of years. We are purchasing bookshelves. We obviously have a rather large furniture package in general for the the summer bond renovations, specifically lots of furniture going into LMCs that are getting renovated, remodeled, updated. This is specifically the bookshelves. These are the same bookshelves that the board has seen, or if anybody's been in any of our renovated libraries, if you've popped into Franklin or into Coolidge or any of the schools that we're at, these are standard with regard to the bookshelves. With regard to lead time, we want to get this to the board and on order for those spaces. So this is really a similar, something that the board has seen, not only seen in the sense that they've been at board meetings before, but literally, we were just at Cleveland last week, and we've seen those same bookshelves. And they're beautiful. The ones that are against walls can be a little taller, but we have a height maximum of 4 feet with regard to any that are in the middle area or open area of an LMC. So this comes from the purchasing agreement, the National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance. We have, through French Associates, who is our architectural firm, we do have NBS, who is our furniture vendor, and they have pulled together this information, and the pricing has fulfilled the board's requirement to bid.
Comments or questions on this item? President Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Mr. Francis said, with all these bookshelves, are they color-specific to the school, or are they all the same color?
The latter.
Okay.
It's a new,
The end caps might be different.
correct, that's an add-on pieces that Mrs. Oakes was saying. You might see the end caps, we have these special end caps that have a book display on them. Those are an add-on piece, and the background color of those might be different. The furniture itself, meaning the bookshelves themselves, we've kept the finish. It's a light, neutral, nice color that will work throughout all of our buildings.
And that's what we saw at Cleveland the
Yes.
other night, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other comments or questions?
I just want to clarify, there will be a separate presentation as we finalize the soft seating and flexible tables and all the other furniture within those spaces will be a separate presentation. Yeah, this is bookshelves to get the procurement process going, so we get that in time.
And for members of the community, if you have not yet had the opportunity to see some of our renovated LMCs, please take advantage of doing so. If you have children in the buildings, when you're there for open house or conferences or any other activity, pop into the LMC. They are really warm, inviting, exciting spaces for our kiddos. If you don't have children in our district any longer, but you'd like to see some of your tax dollars at work, contact your building principal. And I'm certain that they would be happy to show you around, because there's some really, really exciting renovations going on that even as board members, as many times as we see it, when we were able a week or two ago to pop in for another board meeting, it's exciting to see that space just revitalized, and a lot of it is in the furniture. It's updated, it's flexible furniture, it's, like I said, the bookshelves being 4 feet, you don't think about the benefit of that, but to have the media specialist or the teacher be able to see right across the entire LMC, it keeps things under control. But the colors, the textures, the furniture are really, really exciting. It's basically the excitement of, what it reminds me of is the excitement of a college student center brought down to the appropriate K-12 level, whether it's elementary, middle school, or high school. But it's very, very exciting. So thank you for all of your work to make it that way.
Thank you.
And that would be on regular.
All righty. Next item is 3C, French, the 2024 LMC presentation for the 2021 bonds.
Well, as if Mrs. Burton's last few moments discussing the renovated LMCs weren't built up enough, we're now going to talk more about the LMCs. They are dynamite looking. We're inviting in French Associates to do a presentation. Just to give a little background, the presentation you're about to see, we're going to be cruising through a bunch of the slides because the board had that. Last time you saw Amy, not too long ago, she went through slide by slide with those renderings. Today's really about sort of giving that reminder, so we'll go through those slides pretty quickly just to refresh everyone's memory and then get into the animated portion of it. So as you may recall, the last 2 years, actually, you know what, I'm gonna do this before I forget. Give you that. The last 2 years, about this time, last year in 22, or in 21, we also came in and had this presentation where we had 3 schools, LMCs, have an animated live type of fly-through, if you will. And it's a really neat item to see because it brings to life what Mrs. Burton was just describing with words. It brings it to life on the screen for us. So it's a nice view. We went through it last week as a cabinet team, and it gets a lot of oohs and ahs as you go through. And the beauty of it is we have our architects here, so if you want to ask a question about it, please feel free.
Well, thanks for having us again. This is the fun part. I'm Amy, and then this is Alex.
Hello there.
He's one of our lead designers, so he'll be taking a role in this today as well. So we'll start going through, and like Phil said, we'll be touching base on. We're not pushing the right button.
Let's see here.
We'll run through what we ran through in October, just to get a refresher so you know what you're looking at when we get to the 3D images.
Just hit the rights and lefts.
Okay. Perfect. So we've got the 5 buildings for 2024 summer work. Hayes Elementary is one of the elementary schools. Overview is that we will be renovating the kitchen in that building. This one is basically the kitchen turns into a storage room, and then there's a new kitchen that flanks the side of the gymnasium, so about quadruple the size. This is the layout of the media center. So you'll be seeing this in the fly-through. We picked 3 of the buildings, and it's we've got Roosevelt, Hayes, and Holmes that will be flying through with the renderings. So kind of keep this image in your mind for what we'll be walking through virtually. Hoover is the second elementary we'll be doing. Overview of this one, same like we did before. We have the elements of the flex space, the idea factory, the book area, and this one, the idea factory, is that darker blue that's outside of the media center. For this one, for the kitchen is very similar to what you've seen at Kennedy. We'll expand it a little bit, and it will remain in its current location, but get a little bit larger, and then we'll have a walk-in cooler outside. This is the layout for the media center, the LMC. The flex space is up at the top portion with a nano wall that will open up. And then the bookcases are down in the lower area, giving a very flexible space in the middle for all that furniture we were talking about earlier. Kind of move it around, use it as they need it for each space. And then upper and to the upper left is the idea factory. Roosevelt, this is another one that we'll be doing the fly-through for. This is the kitchen. For this one, we're raising up the floor, so now it will be an even floor across the entire space. Right now, it's sunken on the lower portion. That will help with the flow of the students through the space. It stays in its current location, but we make it all one big room because there was a storage room within it. So now it's all open, and the walk-in cooler fits right in there. For the LMC, we've divided that into the 3 spaces as well. We've got the flex space over in the lower left. We've got the book area, the majority of that space in the upper area, and then the idea factory is a current computer lab that will be retrofitted. For homes, this one we have a couple ancillary spaces. You can see that in the orange, that we have some office spaces that we're renovating or creating, as well as renovating some current resource rooms. For the kitchen, it'll be very similar to Frost, same footprint, just renovating all of the majority of the equipment, refreshing some of the terrazzo floor, lowering any curbs that were there, so it's all accessible, movable, cleanable, easy function. And then the media center, the big blue area is all the flexible seating. The darker blue is the book stacks. In this one, we did create a more prominent secondary entrance. I don't know if you can see my mouse. It's to the left, there we go. Okay, we created that like sunken entry. So because you come out of that main entry or main office area, so we did want to have an easy, visible entrance to the space, and you'll see that in our fly-through. It's a very nice, engaging entrance now. And then Stevenson's our high school that we're renovating this year. Very similar in footprint to Franklin, but you'll see some different elements. The kitchen, we'll be renovating the north and the south line. In this one, unlike Franklin, we're going to put that new rolled good flooring over the terrazzo because we've got quite a bit of, or the quarry tile, sorry, over the quarry tile since we've got quite a bit of work that would impact it. So that will create a very easily cleanable flooring finish.
I'm just going to jump in real quick to remind the board and anybody at home who might be watching the video, when we talk about the flooring, terrazzo is just a fantastic, sturdy, and beautiful flooring that when we have that, we try to keep that. And if it needs some patching, we do so. If it's other types of tile, we've been coming in, whether it be a toilet room or the kitchen, and we're putting a different type of surface over it. So just to clarify that the terrazzo portion, it wasn't that Stevenson is getting skimped on the floor. Actually, they have a gorgeous floor. Franklin was also the same with their terrazzo. We patched where we needed to and polished it up, and it looks really sharp.
For the media center, we created the flex space very similar to Franklin with the nano wall. And then the upper left is the book area, so kind of flip-flopped. And then very flexible group area down at the lower portion that would give a full classroom worth of students to be able to function within that media center and still have the resources. Then this is kind of just an overview of the toilet room renovations. Any toilet room that has currently a tile floor, we're going over with epoxy to help seal in any of that grout, help with cleaning and odors. And then there's a couple accent toilet rooms per building that get the wall tile. Whoop. Well, that concludes the quick overview. We'll move on. So we're going to start with Roosevelt. We're going to do this quick fly through, and then we can go through the whole animation. If you guys want to stop and have me look back at other portions, we can do that easily. Okay. I don't know how you get the mouse. If I just hit play, nope. Sorry, like easy way. Are you guys able to do it? Yeah. Thank you.
You should just be able to trigger it and it starts to roll. Hit the little play button.
Oh, there we go. So we're walking down the hallway and we're coming into the main entrance. We filled in the display cases, and you can see one will have a monitor on the side, the other one will be just filled in. We're walking in through the entrance. We have, to the one side is the workroom for the LMC, and then to this other side, we're gonna walk right into the flex space. And you'll see that nano wall slide open for that flexibility. And then now you're into the main media center. So all this furniture goal is that it's very flexible. They can slide it around, they can move it and reconfigure it how it fits that year, that day, that LMC specialist. Now we're looking into the main area, which we're looking towards the book area. And those are the bookcases that we're talking about. The end pieces are what they're going to display their featured books. And then we're looking at, right now, this is the office. So this will be the LMC specialist office. It is the same footprint it is now, just spruced up. And we added some windows on the other side, so he has visibility into the book area and a little bit of a glimpse at the adjacent idea factory. And we added, one of the alternates was for exterior windows. So we added 5 exterior windows to allow some natural light into the space. And after seeing what it even did with Riley, we just think it's going to be huge, impactful for this building. They will have the option to put some roller shades down if needed, but hopefully it's mostly open to kind of bring that natural element in.
That was all a closed wall prior.
And now we're headed towards the Idea Factory. So one of the elements that we have is the fun, funky windows to kind of bring intrigue from the students that are in the media center or vice versa. So we added that element here in the existing wall. We'll head right in there. And we added the circle lights, similar to the other buildings, as well as the little pops of color through the ceiling with different shaped lights. This will have a teaching wall, so it can function as a full classroom. And then it will have the specific Idea Factory furniture that we've used in the other buildings as well to fit a full classroom of students in it.
Can those windows close if you want to block off between the two sections?
No, those are, just
Not
open.
close, but just,
Shades?
Yes.
No shades in there, so we want full engagement. And then it's back into the main media center to look at from the other view. We've got a sunburst up on the ceiling, some clouds to the side. It still has the open feel to it. We didn't want it to make it feel enclosed at all. Bring in the natural light from the side, all sides now.
Like the sunburst, it's a cool touch.
And then back through the flex space. Really helps open the space up. That was before, that was a workroom, so this gained more media center space, allows him to have a flexible classroom. He's also going to have his reading circle along the exterior wall, so that will be a nice new feature for him. All right, does anybody have any questions or want to go back to any images?
So
All
just
right.
to answer your question about that, the teaching space is separate from the windows in the Idea Factory, and so they may catch a glimpse of it, but it's separate from the media specialist. And we really are encouraging our kiddos to get used to seeing what's happening. Part of it is to really build that excitement, and so we realize that in some places that may initially be distracting, but it really is part of a classroom management piece to be able to take a look in there, like in Rosedale, when we saw that, and you could take a peek. And it really is meant to generate excitement and enthusiasm for what's happening in there. And so we've talked with our media specialist about that, as well as our project lead, the way or other staff.
Okay, so next we'll move on to Hayes Elementary. Right.
So that might be,
There we go. Okay, here we go. So this is Hayes Elementary School. So here we are entering into the Learning Media Center again. We've got some nice bold lettering on the front to identify where you're entering. Here we can see the paw prints on the flooring to guide you into this space, along with some of the Idea Factory windows to your right. Some very nice color exposure on the walls and on the ceiling here, bringing you into the space. We'll look to our right here and see the inside of the Idea Factory. Again, playing off with those geometry and the ceiling clouds, inspiring fun, creative space. I've got that full teaching wall on the back wall there. Lots of creative, flexible seating to go along with that to encourage just the thinking and creative process. As we look out the other way, we'll lead back into the space here. As you can see, we're entering into space on your right. You'll see the flex space with the accordion-style nano wall opening up into the large media space. As you can see, we have the existing clear story windows around the top of the ceiling. The flexible space for the nano wall comes into the Learning Media Center a bit, but we've sloped the ceiling to allow some more sunlight into the space. As you can see here, we've created this little bit of a reading nook to the left. And on your right, you'll see us walking into the flex space. As you can see, it got that large teaching wall on that back wall there, really allowing for the opening of that space to be flexible. And like Amy said, having those flexible furniture helps a lot. If you'll notice, there's some very faint hints to some airplanes in the ceiling here. There's some red and blue airplanes to inspire some fun and to keep it uplifting space. We have a white ceiling here to make it seem light and airy, giving that really just that open feel to the space and encourage dreams and creativity. Again, looking over here at our reading nook, and we're upgrading some of those bookcases on the wall there, as well as all the interior bookcases throughout the space, really helping to create that visual across the entire space there. And then on to your right there, you can see the Learning Media Center office that has a great view of the entire space itself. We'll keep walking in here. This is that Learning Media Center office. As you can see, we've got some cabinetry and a counter workspace, all with a glazing looking straight out into the space itself. Create good visual. And then again, as you walk inside and outside of the LMC, you get these great views and these peephole windows, the circle windows into the Idea Factory. Any questions on Hayes Elementary School?
Some of those items that you see on the wall up high, we saw like, they almost look like waves. And the airplanes, which if you go, we saw those at Cleveland last week at the study session. Not are they only playful and colorful and aesthetically fun to look at, but that's for sound attenuation. They actually have a purpose as well. We have high ceilings in these media centers. Even the K4 media centers are high ceilings and noise bounces. So it's nice that the design has not just been only utilitarian where something is just for that purpose. It also looks nice, it's playful, and it inspires students. So I really like that part. I think the waves look really good too. I love the airplanes.
Love the waves.
And I like the waves a lot.
Yeah,
Very fun.
very cool.
Okay, great. We can move on to the next one. We'll take a look at Holmes next. So again, this is Holmes Middle School. This one's a bit larger. Obviously, it's a middle school. So as we enter into the space, you can see some upgrades on obviously the flooring, but especially on the ceiling. Have some colored soffits and a nice little touch in the acoustic clouds there, really bringing you into the space. As you walk in, you see this variation of lights and ceiling lights that are a little bit different than what you're normally seeing but still creating a lot of light here. Here's where all your open bookcases are and some furniture, creating all that, you can get a book, you can come back to this furniture and read it for a minute. As we pan back here, you can start to see just the variation in the ceiling here really changes from space to space. In this one, you can really feel that quieter, more subtle space. As you walk towards the center, you can start to see all that variation start to change. So it really changes as you go in one space, but you're really changing spaces as you go through. Again, some more of that flexible furniture in the middle. And we'll take a look towards, this is one of the circulation desks that are movable. But this is a great feature as well for, depending on the day and where the LMC specialist wants to be. Right here, we'll take a look at one of the workrooms. So this is a really nice elevated workroom with all new cabinetry and countertops with ADA height, accessibility for the work table. As we exit that, there's an LMC office attached right to that. And as you can see here, you get a really great view of the space from the LMC office. And out in this, to your right, you see that flex space opening, and then your Idea Factory with those fun windows to give that engagement towards the interior of the Idea Factory, seeing what's going on in there. And again, playing around with the geometry in the ceiling, help foster creativity and free thinking for the mind. In this one, the shape of the window is really kind of reminiscent of a mountain or something when I look at it. Next, we'll take a look at the flexible space here. As you can see, that accordion-style nano wall opens up and creates a very flexible space. As you can see, those tables and those chairs, they spill out into the LMC, allowing you to have a very large group instruction. And if you needed it a little bit smaller, you can obviously close those and have a smaller group meeting. Obviously, this is completely flexible, so you can do anything we want with it. As we look towards the other side of the LMC here, you can really start to see the changing of the ceiling again, with all these acoustic ceiling clowns varying in height. As to Amy brought up earlier, this is that entrance off that main office there, and on both the right and the left side, you get these really nice group workrooms that are in glass, so they can be very transparent but very private at the same time. And then this is exiting right into that corridor where the main office is. It is Holmes Elementary, or Holmes Middle School, sorry.
It may have been hard to see, but as you exited, that very last scene, that's the other side of the hall is the main office. We're adding in on the right and the left 2 glass student workrooms. If you're looking for it in there, you might catch a glimpse of it of the side, but that's actually both of those right and to the left will be student workrooms, fully glassed. We've seen those in other spaces as
And
well.
that's for how many students approximately? Is that like 1 or
About-
2 or a
about
whole
6.
classroom?
Yeah, you can get a small group in there.
Yeah, about 6, yeah.
Okay.
And then they also have windows into the corridor as well. Small
Okay.
sliver of windows, not too large, but just enough for the engagement.
Okay, all righty.
And then
Miss-
you saw that large 4-square area, that booth area, that's similar to Emerson. If you remember that, that's in the center of Emerson. So that piece is very similar. So after you first enter, it may have been hard for you to orient because we started
Yeah, we
looking
started
at the
at the,
bookshelves and then came back the other way. And so there is that whole flexible furniture area that is now in the entrance to the media center.
That's very cool.
And
Mrs. Bradford?
the glass rooms, the glass room that we saw at the end, is that the one where you said is a small area for students, right?
Yes, correct.
They
Yeah.
did show it,
If you,
correct?
yeah,
But-
literally as they were walking out, as the
Right,
camera flew through the door.
and you said they're
right?
on both sides?
It's on both sides, so it's a cubicle if it was the 1970s, if
Yeah.
you will.
Got it. I think that's great. That looks really nice.
Mrs. Acosta?
Thank you. And that's the actual color scheme that we're looking for?
Correct.
Okay. I love the greens. I mean, there's something serene and peaceful about it, but it also matches with all the other things going on in that building.
The design team from French, they put together a couple of different color palettes, and then they introduced them to the school. And they try to bring in school colors as well. Obviously, there's green in Holmes. We saw Hayes having the colors of Hayes, and we see just kind of through our schools that same pattern going. So they show them a couple of different patterns, but it isn't, here's a book of 500 pages, what are you thinking? Because nothing will ever get accomplished that way. So the design team really leads the school down that road, and if the pattern of that carpet is not something that they care for, then we can find another pattern that is in that same color family, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really nice process in that sense, because, frankly, the principals and the media specialists and the teams from the schools, they do enjoy picking those things, but they also don't want to do 3 weeks of turning pages and trying to match things together. That's why we have a design team.
And one thing, especially at Holmes, I want to thank the media specialist because she really thought about how she was going to use that space in its new format and really came to the table with her ideas, and I think it really helped form that space
Because it's such a big space. It really
It was
is.
just a
It's big
rectangle,
space.
you
That's a
know.
huge
It's
space.
hard with a square, really. We would like to have some geometry. And you'll see it's similar to Frost. We, in the center space, we blacked out the ceiling, brought those clouds in to help with acoustics, but also to make it feel bigger because that's the flexible area.
Okay. Comments or questions on this one?
So in addition to that, Stevenson and who?
Looks great.
I'm sorry.
And just, and not playing favorites, that we've paid for 3 of these, and so that's what we'll see when we come into these. So we would love to have them do those for all 5, but
Animated ones.
we had contracted to have 3 of those animations.
And we want to leave it up to your imagination, so when you walk in, it's a surprise. Well, we thank everybody for having us again, and we hope you have a good holiday season, but we always love coming in and showing what we've been working on for the year.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Beautiful,
it.
thank
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Alex. All righty.
Okay, thank you.
The next item on our agenda is item 3D, purchase of high school pool scoreboards, 2021 bond. Mr. Francis and Mr. Weber.
Thank you very much. We mentioned the high school pools, so there's quite a bit of, that we have that you're not seeing here. This is just the scoreboards. We have quite a bit for those areas that are in the full package that'll be done in each pool room. The reason that this is being brought forward, and again, mentioned this at the study session, but just to mention it to the public on camera, Stevenson's board is pretty much at end of life. And so instead of running into one building and putting one board up, we decided, let's just do the 3. It's not going to impede in any way the actual renovation. It'll be mounted on the wall, it'll be out of the way, and that way we can just get this ball rolling so that so that the schools have an updated scoreboard. This will tie into the timing board that you use with pool events. And so we also have, like I said, a whole bunch of other work to do. So I just don't want to throw anybody off too much on, we just talked about the summer renovation and how that was all in the other package. These were pulled out separately so we can get them in hand and installed. And so in your packet, you had 2 quotes, one for the boards, and that was the vast majority of the cost for the boards themselves, and we're buying 3 of those. And then we also have AJ Science, who has been in the district. Daktronics has provided boards at our baseball, softball, football, et cetera. AJ Science is who Daktronics generally brings in to do their installation. So you do have in your packet the quote for the installation amount as well. So the total cost for all 3 with freight and installation and the components that come with them was the $326,118, and that is through Omnia Partners Cooperative Purchase Agreement, which satisfies the board's responsibility and obligation to bid.
And Mr. Francis, these scoreboards we're going to need to be done. We're just
Correct.
pushing them
Pulling
up
them up.
a couple of years because there's no need to wait on the scoreboard itself while the other pool work is being done, correct?
Exactly, and really the impetus was learning that during the year, Stevenson's was having many problems. And so the initial reaction was, okay, let's just go get Stevenson's board now. And we said, well, if we're
Might as
doing
well do
one,
one.
let's just do all 3. It's not going to impede any other
Right,
issues.
and the other 2 were on the schedule to be done within the next year or 2 anyway.
We're
It's
all-
not like they
yeah,
were
we're doing
fine,
3.
they were not fine, it's just that
Correct.
Stevenson's was in exceedingly poor condition.
Correct. All of those components were part of the planned bond work to go in the pools. The timing, the scoreboards, all that other work. So we just pulled it forward a little bit.
Gotcha,
And-
okay,
and
good.
Just to reiterate, this was coordinated with the design team and the engineers. So we had brought this to a couple meetings just to make sure that we weren't doing a separate purchase. It wasn't coordinating with the other renovations. So that was discussed multiple times.
Okay, all right. Questions on this item, comments? All righty, then we'll put, I'm sorry, President Johnson.
Thank you, Mrs. Barron. I may have missed it. What are the warranties on these scoreboards?
It is in here. 2-year warranty, parts coverage. It's on, it's confusing because they have the same quote 3 times, one for each building. They're all the same.
Yeah.
But Mr. Johnson, if you look on page 1 of 3, so if you flip over after my memo.
Oh, I see
On
it
the
now.
right-hand side.
Okay.
And these are LED video boards.
Nice.
Okay.
How long have the boards been in our schools now? Do you know?
I do not know the exact number of years that the current boards are in.
I think
You're talking
it's
the
been-
pool rooms, right?
Right, I think it's
I
been a
don't-
lot of years.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
If I had to guess, a lot would have been what I said too.
Well, it's a technical term.
Yeah, it is. But I can get you, we'll dig into that. I don't have the exact number with the,
All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
All righty. Any other comments or questions on this item? All right, and we'll put this on the agenda for a vote for next week. The next item is 3E, one-man lift purchase from the 2021 bond.
I'm going to say thank you and goodbye to Mr. Weber.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you for your time again.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Bye,
evening.
Brian.
great
Have a
night.
good night.
Bear with me. Here we go. These lifts, they are by Ballymore, and we currently in the district have 10 similar types of one-person lifts. And we use these for obviously getting to higher areas. Very commonly, our secondary schools have high ceilings. So changing a light bulb, replacing a panel that may have gotten wet, whatever the case may be, we need to have these types of lifts. Like I mentioned, we do have currently 10. They are 30-plus years old. They have certainly done their service to us. We are going to replace those 10 with 8. We have, fewer facilities these days, so just being sort of good financial stewards, we feel like 8 is an appropriate amount. These are usable indoors, outdoors. The general plan with the 8 is to send 6 of them out to our secondary buildings. Again, the 3 middle schools and 3 high schools have the largest amount of square footage and the highest ceilings, but if we had to get something over to Riley or to Hayes or whatever, we also will have 2 more in the warehouse, and those can be put on one of our trucks and sent to wherever it is needed.
Okay.
So we spread these out across the district. These are coming from the 2021 bond. It was a planned purchase. In the bond, we did put for maintenance equipment a set budget, and we feel like this is a good time to make this replacement. Again, the others are 30-plus years old. We can put those to auction, and if we can get some value out of them, then we'd be very happy with that.
Questions or comments? Mr. Francis, remind me too, when we put something out to auction, do those dollars go into capital projects funds, or does that go into the general fund?
I will have to pause on that, and I looked over to see if Mrs. Smith was there. She's not there. Mrs. Oquist, do you know offhand?
When we put items out to auction, such as the old 30-year-old old lifts, do those dollars then go back into capital projects funds, or do they go into general fund? General fund?
Thank you.
Okay, okey-doke.
Question.
Yes, Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. When you put those out to auction, like an item like a lift like that, when they're sold, we don't have any, after they're sold, if something were to go wrong with them, that's not our problem, correct?
Yeah, we say it nicer than that, but yes.
No, but yeah, I know. I didn't word that correctly, but you know what
No,
I
I
mean.
understand. I
And we
say it
would not be
jokingly.
under,
Correct.
yeah.
It's
They're
okay.
as is.
As is, thank you,
Yes,
that's
as
what I
is.
meant.
That's a great way, yep.
Yeah, that's a good,
It's
better
usually-
terminology.
It's pretty common, the online auctions are quite popular, and other entities use them both for buying and selling.
Okay, great.
Yes, thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this?
the
Mr.
regular
Francis, I
piece.
also appreciate the fact that you're going from 10 down to 8, recognizing that we don't have to replace one for one. Again, we're nothing if not fiscally responsible around here, but this is just one of those examples. So thank you, I appreciate that.
I'll defer and give credit to Mr. Lau. That was his idea,
Alrighty.
understanding that we have less facilities at the time.
Sounds good. Any other comments or questions? All righty, we'll put this on the agenda for next week for a vote.
Thank you. And I'll say it because I've said it on the other ones. This is from the HPS contract for educational facilities. This does fill the board's requirement to bid.
Okay. The next item is 3F, Central Office Access Control and Alarms.
Thank you. This is a proposed project and purchase from Sentinel. That might be a company that the board is familiar hearing. We use them in different technological projects. This is for the central office administrative building, which is the building that we are currently in. This is a bit of a first try at a new system. We have a system now that is card readers for door access, so our badges that board members have and all employees have will open those doors simply by putting the swipe card up against it. So that's what we talk about, door access. And then we talk about alarms. So obviously buildings have alarms on them, and then alarms need to be monitored. So that's the full package here. So what we're proposing for this building is to veer away from the traditional version of those door access card readers that we have had and moving towards simply a different company. Verkada is the manufacturer of the security cameras that we recently put in through the 2021 bond initiative. And then we reached out to Sentinel, that's the vendor who put in those Verkada cameras, and we spoke with Sentinel, we spoke with the folks directly at Verkada, asked them about their systems, and we would like, and by we, I mean not only myself, the IT department, operations and facilities department, and having conversations with Mrs. Oquist and Mrs. Smith, we'd like to put these systems on this building. We believe that it will be a better system, a more robust system. The Verkada product will integrate with the cameras that we already have installed in this building. And there's some more functionality to the card readers as well. They're just an updated technological item. And our thinking here is this building is really relatively small compared to a school building. And we only really have 3 areas that we put a card access reader on, whereas we have many more of those if we went to a high school, et cetera. So we want to have this as a bit of a pilot project to see if it works the way we do believe it works and the way that we've researched it that it works. But it's always good to do a beta test on something, if you will. So our proposal is, ours is getting along in the tooth as well. We wanted to have this opportunity to bring this project forward. And quite frankly, for the cost of what we're doing in this building, the majority of that cost is actually the 10 years worth of the monitoring. So if you look through the Sentinel quote that we have here, you can see that the equipment is just a little more than $6,000. One of the larger bulk of it is a 10-year license, both for the door and really the lion's share of that is the alarm license, which is a very common item to have. So overall, we're pretty excited to give this a go, and we hope that with the board's approval and support of this, we can have this product installed in this building. Everybody in this district who works for LPS, their card, their badge, gets them into this building. So we thought it would be a good test run to say, if a teacher comes here for a meeting, they're using their badge and getting into that front door because they're an employee during certain time periods that it's set. If you're a paraprofessional coming over to talk to HR because you have a question, they use their badge, they come on in, et cetera, et cetera. So we thought this would be a small-scale version that we could potentially end up then spreading out as we need to go in and replace alarm systems and door badges and card readers and access in other buildings. So I hope I laid that out relatively linearly.
Mrs. Frank?
Just 2 questions. One is, so will we need, I think that you said this at the study session, we don't need new badges. The badges that we have will translate.
Correct. The RF reader and the badge and the type of card swipe that we have now will work with these.
Okay. And I don't think that you said this, I'm sorry if I missed it, but 10 years, we talked about this at the study session too, that we decided, it feels like that's a big jump, but we decided to go for 10 years because it was more cost effective. And so even though it's a trial run, we're doing 10 years because of the cost, that it's actually a better cost outlook if we do 10 years as opposed to just doing a 1 or 2 year. Is that correct?
Correct. 1 year at a time. We could do, and we actually inquired about,
Right.
in Verkada even said, you've already got the security cameras on a 10-year license. Why wouldn't you match them together and you'll just save dollars in the long run? Had that conversation with Mrs. Smith about the 1 year versus the 10-year. She was supportive of it from a fiscal standpoint as well. So
Yeah.
it just sort of made overall sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
President Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Byrne. I'm a little confused. which isn't unusual. Looking at, I see this estimate from Prudential Alarm.
Yes.
Is that what we're looking at? Is
I
that-
did, so I apologize and did not bring them into the fold. Quite frankly, we ended up saving money. We had a full quote from Sentinel to do, to bring in the equipment, install the equipment, and then purchase the license. And so that was all on a Sentinel originally quote. Mr. Clan was doing some more due diligence, was having conversations, reached out to Verkada, asking about, can we save a few dollars here, there, anywhere? And they said, they're the ones that gave us the Prudential Alarm. They say, they work with our product all the time. We recommend you give them a call and get a quote. We did, it was less, so we pulled out the installation from Sentinel, and we have the installation only via Prudential. So I apologize, I skipped over that piece, President Johnson. So that actually saved us some dollars. Overall, that brought this down to below what's required for board approval. So I was going to discuss with the board saying, we can, frankly, because it was done off of consortium and it's below the board requirement, I'd like to start the ball rolling tomorrow with signing up the contract and getting some dates on, because we aren't required now with the pricing that we have to have board approval. If you're comfortable with that, great. If you still want to vote on it next week, I'll bring it back.
I think we should not be voting on it because we have policies and procedures, and I believe it's best to follow those. If this is underneath, I don't want to be arbitrary on what we choose to vote on that's under that threshold. But I do appreciate, like many other things, that you brought it to the board for our attention, and so we know what's going on, especially when it's something as important as card readers and alarms and access and so forth.
Yes, and we're excited for this one, and we would like to move forward.
I do have one question on it. When we're talking about alarms, what exactly would trigger alarms? What alarms are we talking about in this building?
So if the alarm is set and it's during a time period, 2 a.m, where we know that no one's supposed to be in the building and the alarm is now on and set. So right now, when I leave, or if somebody's, I can code out and turn the alarm on. So if I happen to come by on a Saturday to grab something from the office, I turn the alarm off. When I leave, I turn the alarm on. So when that's armed, if there's motion in the building, or if one of the doors are opened,
Okay.
it will trigger the alarm.
Okay,
This
as opposed to a
system-
fire alarm or any other kind of alarm?
Correct.
Okay.
And yes,
Okay.
and if I get just slightly nerdier here, the fact that it's tied into our security camera system, the capacity that it has is for us to be at home, get an alert on our phone that the alarm has gone off, and yes, we have the monitoring, that's happening, but we could open and look and see what, is anybody really in here? Oh, something fell over. Right? This, I'll tell you, in our buildings, building supervisors get alarm calls in the middle of the night, and they go in to see what happened, and it's things that a poster board came down, and that motion was detected and triggered an alarm. So this could be not only a convenient item, but we also don't have to have people coming in the middle of the night and have to pay them to come in the middle of the night to check on these types of things. So we have, again, sort of this grand scheme scheme's probably not a great word, right? But this idea of how this can actually benefit us in many ways by updating the technology that we use.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this item? Mrs. Jarvis?
Mr. Francis, just to reiterate, this new system is compatible with our recently upgraded cameras.
Correct,
So
yes,
it helps us to utilize that new system to a greater capacity.
correct.
So that's kind of exciting then.
It is.
I like to see those mutual upgrades where they work together and make us even stronger. So thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions on this? All righty, then we will not be putting this on the agenda.
Correct.
Okay.
All right,
Uh,
thank
that-
you.
Thank you very much for all those items, and this concludes Building and Site.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. That'll take us to item 4, our Finance Committee, and I will turn it over to our Chair, Mrs. Bonifield.
Thank you. We have 3 items tonight. Mrs. Smith is going to help us out, and the first item is A 23-24 budget amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Bonifield, and thank you to the board. We were able to spend quite a bit of time last week walking through, let me give you a fresh one. There we go. We were able to spend some time last week at our study session. We had the budget book in front of us, so we were able to go through each one of the funds and answer questions, and I could give you some detail. My plan for tonight would be to do the same again for our community, and of course, if the board has any further questions they'd like to ask. I'll start. There was a question asked just during the building and site about where the proceeds go from sale of property. I think specifically the lifts was the question. So the sale of property, such as the land we talked about under the committee of the whole, and even these type of properties, or like the sale of our buses, at this point, because we're within that 15 to 20% range, it is all going into our capital projects fund. So if that ever drops down, that would shift back to the general fund. But at this point, any sale of property, have it be land or actual tangible equipment or property, goes into that capital projects fund. So, and we'll see that tonight when we look at our capital projects fund. Okay, with that, we'll jump in. I would also like to mention, this, of course, will be in the packet for the board for next week's voting meeting. And I wanted to let our community know, if you would like to see this, once it's been approved by the board, it does get updated and placed on our transparency page of the website. So you can see the proposed budget there, and you'll be able to see this amendment there and go over it in detail on our website. With that, I'll jump into our general fund revenue. So during this first amendment, I'm recommending we increase the revenue by $2.2 million, which is wonderful news. This is a result of 2 new state aid categoricals, and then 1 categorical that we've had before, but they've increased it. So the first new categorical is under Section 29, and it's enrollment stabilization categorical, and we are anticipating to receive about $700,000 from the state in that new categorical, and it's meant to help districts that are in a declining enrollment scenario. And so what they're doing is they're taking a blend of what our student count was from last year and this year and coming up with a blend, and then they're subtracting out what our student count will be for this year, and whatever that difference is, they're multiplying that times the foundation allowance and giving you that in this funding. So it's really meant to help districts kind of bridge that gap. We know that our student count overall is going down, but they're not all leaving from one building at one time where you can make a staffing adjustment. It's a few across the district, so it's an opportunity for us to work that out over the next couple of years as we adjust to our actual student counts. The other new categorical was one that came about, we believe, based on the Finance Research Collaborative that was looking at the costs that schools are incurring, and this one is under Section 22L, and it's reimbursing districts for transportation costs. We fill out a transportation report every year to the state, and currently are only getting a reimbursement for a portion of our special education transportation costs. We get about a 70% reimbursement, but there's currently no reimbursement specifically for transportation costs. So under this new Section 22L, the estimate that was shared with us is about $700,000. That was what was included, or the number that was shared with us during our November state aid report. They did give us an asterisk next to the number, though, and shared with us this number will be impacted when the conclusion of their transportation study is done, which they think, I believe, is going to be the end of February. So during our final budget amendment, I may need to come back with an adjustment to this line item based on what the actual revenue is. But at this point, because our fund balance is where it is, it felt like we could safely add that into our budget at this time. The last item of note on this page is an adjustment that we talked about in October, and that's our beginning fund balance, what we ended last year's school year off with and what we started this one off with. We projected starting off with $31.4 million, and our actual beginning fund balance was $31.5, so about $100,000 more than we had budgeted. Moving on, we'll take a look at our expenditures. On the expenditure side, we also are experiencing an increase or projecting an increase overall of about $3 million. The largest reason for this increase is a shift of staff back to the general fund that were paid for out of grants last year. And we'll see that on the next page as we look at our funded projects fund. So that's what we see. Specifically, the largest increase is under the basic programs line. We've started the year off with about $86.5 million of projected expenditures, and during this amendment, I'm proposing to increase that to $88.9 million. And that basic program line covers all of our elementary, middle school, and high school teachers, teaching supplies, which is a huge portion of our budget. A couple line items that I'll point out too, we also see a shift under instructional staff support and the general administration. Those two line items specifically are going up because of some grant funds not being renewed this year and some of those staff coming back to the general fund. So not new staff being added to the general fund, just a shift of staff from the funded projects fund back over to the general fund. And I'll also point out the last line under support services, athletics. We had budgeted for $3.5 million this year in athletic costs, and I've increased that to $3.9 million. The largest driver of that is what we discussed in June was the weight room renovations. As you'll recall, our weight rooms had not been touched in over 20 years, and we did a bid, got those results. We are doing some cosmetic improvements, some structural things to the floor, and we're also replacing all of that 20-year-old equipment. So we had tentatively budgeted for that to be about a $750,000 project, and that was before doing any bids. And then once the bids came in, that the project cost came in closer to $1 million, just under $1 million. With all that said, though, I'm happy to report that our ending fund balance for this school year is still within that sweet spot recommended by the Michigan school business officials of 15% to 20%. So projected to end the school year with $31.6 million and a 17.7% fund balance.
Sorry,
Mrs. Smith, can you remind me again what community services is for?
Sure. The largest cost there is our childcare, so that would be Jackson Center. So that's a fee-based program, and you'll see the increase there from our 22-23 actual to the proposed. Last year, we were fortunate to get I believe it was $1.4 million. We'll see that on the next page, a child care stabilization grant. So last year, we were able to shift some of our child care costs to that grant. And now that that grant is no longer available, those staff have come back to the general fund. So not new staff, it's not an expansion of the program, simply grant funds being fully expended last year and those staff coming back to our general fund this year.
And back up to basic programs, the grants that had covered some of our staff last year previously.
Yep.
Did those, and you said those grants just, did they expire or did we apply for them again and not get them this year?
It's a combination. The largest grant was our ESSER grant, which are related to the COVID pandemic, and
Right.
that we knew would be time limited. They're from the federal government, and so those grants we could not apply for
Right.
again. Another one that came back to the general fund, we had gotten a Section 98C learning loss grant last year, and now in looking at it, the state was actually using their share of COVID monies to fund that 98C grant. Now their ESSER funds are expended, and so they did not renew that. We, though, I'll specifically look at our chief academic officer, though, are constantly on the hunt for grants, and I know Ms. O'Brien is in the process now of applying for grants, so I will hopefully be bringing back an amendment in June, or if not sooner, that shows even maybe a shift back to of some staff back to grants this year. But at this point, want to take a conservative approach and show you what it could look like if all those grants don't necessarily come through for us.
All right, thank you.
And I'll pause there to say that is one of the things with our state funding, so much of it coming through these categorical funds instead of coming through the foundation allowance. There's a lot, not that there shouldn't be hoops to jump through, but it really slows down our process. Obviously, our fiscal year started July 1st. I can tell you that 98C grant that I just referenced, the learning loss grant, we didn't actually get until March of this past year. So like 9 months into the school year, you find out if you're getting a grant and what exactly is approved. So that's a real struggle, you know, and part of it is the legislators are approving these things in the summertime, and then MDE needs time to, you know, come up with a game plan of how they're going to allocate it out to the schools. And then they review those applications, and then we're not seeing those until well into the second half of the school year. So while we appreciate the grants, we of course won't turn them down. It would be very nice if they could figure out a way to get that to us at the beginning of the school year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Crystal?
You spoke about athletics and the new weight rooms, and I think there is sometimes, this is just an aside, but a general thought of what is the district doing with all the money from the gate sales and all the money from pay to play and that sort of thing. And I think it's just important to say, while there are fees that are associated with athletics, the district out of the general fund does pay a lot for athletics. And I think that it's just important that those monies offset some, but there is still a major expenditure out of our general fund that goes to athletics, which it should, and we are so thrilled with our student athletes that they get the opportunity to do it. But I think sometimes when you pay those $5 fees that you're thinking, there's millions and millions of dollars coming in at the doors, and so it still does come out of the general fund.
Yep, that's correct. Off the top of my head, if I had to come up with a number, we maybe between gate receipts and the pay to participate fees, maybe bring in $1 million. And you can see we're spending, you know, $3.9 million in athletics, so it doesn't cover it even closely. I will share, though, we do compare ourselves to other districts to see, are we in alignment? Should we be adjusting something? And that's the case that we see across other school districts, too, that generally those pay to participate and the athletic gate receipts don't cover the full cost of athletic programs. But just as you said, though, there's such a benefit to it for our students. So, of course, it's a good use of, in my opinion, a good use of our general fund dollars.
And I just will make note, just to add on to that one of the things that I know that our parents have appreciated and our student athletes and coaches is that the board did support a lowering of the pay to participate fees over the past couple of years. So that is an additional cost that is borne by the district. And we also began this year taking over the cost of the replacement for uniforms. And so we're doing that on a rotation. Our 3 athletic directors are working hard on that, working with coaches as well. But to take that expense away from teams so that they can, one, lessen the fundraising burden. We've encouraged them to do less fundraising and less asking of funds from family, friends, et cetera, because we are in a position to be able to fund that. And as we looked across the KLAA, that was something the majority of districts were taking on as an expenditure. And so one thing we're really pleased about is that we feel that not only the dollars assigned from the general fund just to run the athletic programs, to pay for officials, to keep up our facilities, et cetera, but we feel like we've been able to directly impact families by taking over the uniform costs and lessening significantly the pay to participate fees. And so that was something we really wanted to do to, one, encourage greater participation from our students so that isn't a barrier, and also to recognize that families incur a lot of expenses as children are growing up, and we want robust teams, and we appreciate the board's continued support because we know we've brought that forward to you, and we are also very conscious that it is a significant expenditure for us each year, but we certainly think it's something we would continue to recommend doing.
With that, I'll move on to the Funded Projects Fund. On the next page is our Funded Projects Fund, which is like a subgroup or a subsection of our general fund. We isolate those just for better tracking of our grants. And I will point out, actually, it's kind of interesting, maybe going to the bottom line, the bottom of the page shows the total federal sources, and we can really see the influx of some of those pandemic grants and what it's doing now that they are being used up. So last year, we spent $20.6 million in federal grant dollars. We thought we would be starting the school year off with 14.8, and during this amendment, we're at about $12.6 million. So none of that, again, those are things that we, knew and we knew were coming and we've planned for, but it's a pretty big shift when you see it like that. A few things that I'll point out on this page, one of them, and we talked about this last week, was the combination. We last year received 2 different categoricals, one for student mental health and another one for school safety. This year they have eliminated that school safety grant, but then they've allocated those dollars under the mental health grant, and now they're calling it mental health and school safety. So if you're wondering why our Section 97 grant, why it looks like we're receiving less. It's not that we're necessarily receiving less, we're just receiving it under a different categorical. And that $400,000 that you see left under the 97 grant is carryover money, so that's grant funds we didn't spend last year that we're able to utilize this year. And we have utilized that for the replacement bus cameras we're doing. And then under that federal sources, I'll just point out a few of the federal grants that didn't renew. The child care grant, for instance, was one that we received $1.4 million last year, and again, we were able to defer or offset some of our costs, and we shifted those costs from the general fund over to this grant, but that was not a recurring grant, so those costs are coming back to the general fund. And then the other grant was our emergency connectivity grant. We received $1.3 million last year for that, and again, those funds were not renewed. Thankfully, that one was the grant that we got the mobile devices for our students, and we put out the survey to our families to find out who needed devices at home. So that isn't an expense that had to come back to the general fund. Moving on from there, our next fund is the Special Education Fund. Of course, yep.
Can we go back
Sure.
for one moment? Could you talk about the Section 23G, Michigan Kids Back on Track?
I sure can. That is one of the ones that Ms. O'Brien just submitted an application for. This is, I'll say, the replacement for that 98C, the Learning Loss Grant. So a lot of this, and correct me, I'm looking at my friend over there, this is going towards, as the name implies, getting kids back on track academically. So looking at the MTSS, looking at summer programmings, looking at different intervention options. Before and after school opportunities for students. That grant application I know has been submitted, and that's an example of one that now we have to wait for the state to get back to us if they've approved our plan for those dollars.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. They've given us a per pupil dollar amount that we can anticipate, but that plan still has to be submitted to the state, how we think would be the best use of those funds, and the state now gets an opportunity to let us know if they agree with our plan. On the special education fund side, this is where we record our Act 18 program costs, and I know you all know what the Act 18 program is. That's our county-wide special education program. We're fortunate to run 4 programs for moderative cognitive impairments, for visually impaired, for students with autism, and then our Skill Center program, which is our 18 to 26-year-olds with a cognitive impairment. So these funds we receive both from the state and from Wayne Risa. Wayne Risa gets that money through a special education millage that's levied here in Wayne County. We've been fortunate because of the increase in property tax values that special education fund has been had a very healthy fund balance. So Risa has given us some grant funds. I'll call it grant funds, or an additional allocation of that. You'll see under the expenditures line, there is a subline called facility improvements, and they've shared with us that they will give us $691,000 this year to do various improvements and enhancements for our center-based programs. So we're still working on the details of that, what would be the best use of it. Some of it may be offsetting some of the bond dollars that we're utilizing to improve those classrooms, but we know that Ms. Sproul has a lot of ideas too, so we'll continue to work through a game plan and, of course, bring things that need board approval to the board and discuss those with you.
Mrs. Burton.
Mrs. Smith, the state has gone up a couple of $1 million from opposed to now?
Yep.
What's
And
going on?
a big one, and actually now that you say that, I don't know if I covered this during the general fund. We talked about it last week. The Section 51 categorical, the state is now giving us a full foundation allowance for every special education pupil, and that's up from last year. I think last year they gave us 87.5% of the foundation allowance for those students. So we are getting some more of our funds from the state this year. So in total, the way that the special education fund works, it's between the two of those funding sources making us whole. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily more money from us, but it's maybe less burden on the county and that county millage to cover the cost of the programs, and now more of it's being picked up by the state.
Okay, so it's going to be 6 of one, half dozen of another.
Exactly.
It's going to come off the county.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Any other questions? Okay.
Moving on to our debt retirement fund. This one is rather straightforward because we know when we sell the bonds exactly what the payment schedules are going to be. So this amendment, I'm not proposing any changes to the expenditures or the revenue for that matter. During this amendment, it's simply an update to the beginning fund balance. Moving on to our next fund, our 2021 bond fund. This one, too, is rather straightforward, but I can explain. You can see the shift. So in the proposed budget, I had assumed that more of our bond projects would have been completed by June 30th. And as you know, a lot of that work happens over the summertime, so more of it was not complete by June 30th. But these funds will be actually utilized within the next coming months. So during this first amendment, it's an update to the beginning fund balance, an update to the interest income. We've been fortunate. We have these funds invested in the MyLAF program and are earning just over 5% on these funds. So we'll utilize those and help offset our construction costs. And so what we see in this first amendment is a plan to utilize all these funds this school year. And we're definitely on track to do that. I think probably by the end of this month or January, these funds will be fully expended. Which thankfully then lead us to our next fund, the 2023 bond. So when the community passed the 2021 bond, we didn't sell all of the bonds in 2021 because we didn't need all the funds that first year. So you sell them in different series so that you're not incurring borrowing costs on funds that you don't need yet. So we sold the second series in 2023, and now that the 2021 bond has been expended, we'll now be shifting our costs to come out of the 2023 bond. So this fund, just a minor update to the beginning fund balance and then bumping up those expenditures on the facility improvement line. Again, just being conservative in anticipation that maybe more work will be done by June 30th. But any of these funds that aren't spent this year are restricted, and those will become part of the beginning fund balance for next year. Moving on, another fund that we're very fortunate to have here in Livonia Public Schools because of the support of our community is our sinking fund. This is millage that is used for facility costs that help keep these costs out of the general fund. We primarily are using our sinking fund. It was for boilers. Thankfully, we've replaced all our boilers now, so now we're shifting these funds to go towards primarily parking lots and roofs. And of course, we have some kind of one-off projects that come up inevitably throughout the school year. Generally, those are kind of larger projects and come to the board for approval. So this amendment, I'm updating our beginning fund balance. We're starting the school year off with just over $5 million. The revenues, keeping those the same and keeping the expenditures the same. So projecting to end the year with a $3 million sinking fund balance. And again, these are restricted funds that'll be utilized to continue our 10-year facility plan. Yep. The next is our capital projects fund, and this is what we were just discussing earlier about sale of property. So this fund was established a number of years ago, and it is primarily funded from sale of properties. We recognize that those sale of properties are one-time in nature, and we do not want to build recurring costs on those one-time revenues. So we've put those funds in this capital projects fund, and then we do some facility improvements out of this fund. In addition to the sale of property, over the last few years, we've been fortunate to also do some transfers from other funds. Last year, we did a transfer from our general fund, and we also did a transfer from the special education fund. This year, we have built in another transfer from the general fund, and I've also built in 2 potential sale of properties. One that was discussed tonight, the property off of Ann Arbor Trail, and then we have another piece of property adjacent to the Livonia Rec Center that we're currently in discussions about. So, of course, you can see in the ending fund balance, none of those funds are set to be spent yet because those sales haven't concluded. So if the board decides not to move forward with those sales, we would be able to do so safely and have our capital projects fund intact.
Just a quick comment for those who may not know, who may not have been around. The policy that states that the money go into capital projects fund from the capital, any kind of capital project sale, that was exclusive. They could only exclusively go into capital projects. And it was only in the 2008-2009 recession and the few years following when school funding got so incredibly dire that the policy was modified to say that if we are below the MSBO's recommended 15 to 20%, that we changed the policy to allow ourselves to put some into the general fund. But it was never the intention of that policy. That was only when school funding is absolutely dire. So it's very nice to be back in a situation now where school funding for the last handful of years has been back in a healthier range, and our reserves have been in the 15 to 20%, where we are absolutely always putting it back into the capital projects fund. But it really has never been intended to be like an either-or kind of a thing. Its long-term intention was always that those capital sales go into capital projects funds. It was only in those recent years when it got horrifically dire that we allowed ourselves to move some into general if it needed to be.
Yep, absolutely. And it wasn't that long ago. I'm thinking
No,
maybe
it was not.
2015, we were at a maybe 2.5% fund balance. So, yep.
Scary time.
Yes. Yep. I'll move on. If there's no more questions, I will mention on that capital projects fund, again, we've had discussions with the board about using these funds to help us offset our bond projects. The construction costs have only been going up. So we have talked, I believe, the early childhood center roof, we've talked about taking that out of here if it hasn't already happened. That'll be coming out of this fund. We have here at central office, our elevator is in need of repair or replacement. So I've tentatively put that into the budget. Of course, that would be a larger project that would be coming to the board for approval before we proceed with that. Moving on to our food service fund. We've updated the beginning fund balance, and you'll see an uptick in both the revenue and expenditures. So this is in reflection of the state's passage of the free meals for students. So we're seeing an increase in participation, therefore an increase in the revenue coming in to offset the additional costs for the food and whatnot. Moving on to Health and Welfare Fund, I've updated, so when the budget is passed in June, we don't yet have our renewals from our insurance carrier, so we received that this fall. Our increase for the 2024 calendar year will be 3% from Mesa, our health insurance. The hard cap increase is 4.1%, so I've gone ahead and updated the revenues and expenditures based on that information. I will
The hard cap increase was 4.1.
4.1%, yep. And actually, I'll pause there because I should share for anybody watching. Again, I know that you know what the hard cap is, but a law was passed that school districts can either do a split with employees. They can pay for 80% of the cost of premiums with the employees paying the remaining 20%, or you can choose to be a hard cap district. And in that case, the state comes out with a amount annually every year, and the district can pay up to that hard cap amount, up to that amount, and then anything else above that would be borne by the employee. So I don't have the number in front of me. I want to say for a family, it's up in the $20,000 range is the hard cap contribution that the district makes, but maybe the premium for a family plan would be $22,000. So that additional $2,000 would be borne by our employees, and what the district is contributing is the maximum that we can contribute by law. Moving on to our last page, last but not least, we have our two little funds here, our scholarship fund. We are very fortunate, we have some donors in our community that are making donations to provide scholarships to seniors in high school, and we have a little uptick there. Last year, we received just under 17,000, and we didn't know if those would be one-time in nature, so we conservatively said we'd start the school year off with $10,000 worth of donations, and it looks like we'll be more in line with last year's expenditures, so updated the revenue to 15,000, and then also updated the expenditures to reflect those additional scholarships. And I'll point out, this is a restricted fund, so of course, if somebody has made a donation for a scholarship, if maybe they've donated $5,000, but they only issue $4,000 worth of scholarships, that $1,000 doesn't get absorbed into our general fund. It's always stays here in the scholarship fund until it's awarded to a student. And then our last one is the school activities fund. This was a recent GASB that was passed. Now these are considered special revenues. So school activities are really the student activities. These are things that students and families generally generate through different fundraisers. You might see the color runs at our elementary schools. The high schools have different ways to raise those proceeds. So those get deposited in a school activity account. And then when they spend it, those check requests and those purchases all flow through the business office to make sure they're appropriate and in line with how the funds were, what the funds were raised for. So this year, I'm increasing both the revenue and expenditures by about $500,000, and I equate this to our schools being back in the swing of things from post-pandemic. So a nice welcome sight to see. That takes us to the end of the budget book. I will, of course, pause there, though. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Colleen?
Just a quick comment on the school activities fund. The one group of activities that does not fall in here are PTA funds because they are a
Correct.
completely separate entity.
Absolutely
But
correct.
anything that's
Yep.
going through the school itself comes through here to make sure that it's being allocated for properly.
Yep, absolutely. That was something too, back, it's been a number of years now too, our schools used to maintain their own checking accounts, and we've closed all the checking accounts, and now everything runs through the main district account, so that, again, every transaction is monitored and made sure that those are being used how they were intended to be used.
Okay.
Alrighty.
And we're gonna vote on this next week? And
Yes,
are you
please.
gonna do another presentation for us again next week, or are we just gonna move right on?
Up to the board. Generally, I do the highlights at the voting meeting, so happy to do those highlights for you of the general fund, and then refer our community back to the committee of the whole if they would like to go through the details.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, and we're done with that one? Okay, their next item is the summer tax resolution, item B, Mrs. Smith.
Thank you. So this one is one we see every December. This is a requirement for us to pass a resolution if we would like to continue the 50% levy of our property taxes in the summertime. So this is what we currently do. Districts are given the opportunity. They could do 100% levy in the summer, 100% in the winter, or they could do that 50-50 split with the summer and winter taxes. So this is something that we've done in the past. We think it works out well for our community so that they don't have one tax bill, but we can spread out that cost over a few months. And so that's what I would propose bringing to the board next week, would be a resolution to continue that practice.
Okay, any questions on that one? Do you guys care if we put that on the consent agenda?
Or for the tax collection fee?
Yep.
No, the tax
No, just
the collection.
The tax summer tax resolution, it's a resolution that we
The
do every
resolution.
single year.
Yes.
Is that okay, consent agenda? Okay. Oh, Mrs. Frank.
We're gonna come down and talk about the tax collection. I just think, I'm not sure, I think we should keep it separate, just for right now, just because, we're discussing it and what it's gonna look like, if they're gonna, who's gonna collect the taxes, I just think that's hold off on that. Making it part of the, didn't you say to make it part of the,
Consent agenda? You want to pull it off the consent
The
agenda?
resolution?
yeah.
And I will tell you, we did confer with the legal counsel on this. This resolution doesn't designate who collects the taxes. It's just by law, we need to, before December 31st, make it clear our intention to do a levy over the summertime. So if this weren't to pass, then we would not have we would not be able to do a levy in the summertime, and we'd have to be 100% winter.
But if it's on the consent agenda, we don't have any discussion about it, correct?
We can always, pull it, we can always pull it off if we decide that we don't want to put it on, that we do want to discuss. That's always an option.
I would like to pull off of the consent agenda only because there is so much discussion going on right now. We will absolutely be
Okay.
voting on it,
Right.
one way or the other,
Yes.
but I would like to have the opportunity to have discussion.
Okay,
Okay, I understand we're not pulling it off the
Right,
consent
right.
agenda
we're
because
just
we
not
haven't set
putting
the
it
consent
on,
agenda.
yes.
Yes.
Putting it on.
Correct.
We're going to vote on that at the regular meeting as a
Yes.
separate
As its
agenda
own-
item.
Thank you,
Yes,
Mrs.
as its own
Donovan.
standalone island. Thank
Got
you.
it. All over it. Okay. So then that takes us to 4C, which is, again, about city tax, or school tax. So it's City of Livonia Tax Collection Fee Agreement. So Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Oquist is going to lead us off with that.
Sounds good. Would you like me to start?
Sure.
Okay.
Mrs. Smith is going to
So-
lead us off.
This felt like a perfect opportunity this evening to talk about our tax collection agreement with the City of Livonia. First off, of course, because as part of the budget process that we were just going over tonight, one of my responsibilities is to go over line by line our budget and make sure that we've, of course, accounted for everything so that I can present that to you, make sure that what we are spending the money on is reasonable and is right. So this line item had come to our attention because it is a rather large line item in our budget and in the general fund. This year, we're budgeted to pay the City of Livonia $472,000 to collect taxes on our behalf. So this has been quite a large number for a number of years. So part of the due diligence that I have to do is obviously assess if that's reasonable or not. So one of the first things I did was survey our Wayne County school districts to find out if this fee was in line with what the other school districts were paying. And I was somewhat surprised to learn that it wasn't in alignment with what other school districts were paying. By and large, a majority of Wayne County school districts don't pay anything to their municipality for tax collections. And one might wonder, well, is that because they're 100% winter levy and that's when the city's already doing their taxes? Nope, most do either a 50% levy or do 100% actually summer levy. So from there, we also did a survey too of not only the Wayne County school districts, but the 20 largest municipalities here in the state of Michigan. And again, those results came in alignment with what we saw with the Wayne County survey, that a majority of the school districts weren't paying anything, and the handful that were paying significantly less on a per parcel basis. So from there, we, of course, reached out to our legal counsel and wanted to review the statute that allows for the collection of a tax fee. And so we reviewed the law, and I've shared this before, and I'll share with you kind of the line that stood out to me in the law, and it's the law in particular that I'm referring to is Michigan Compiled Law 380.1611. And in that section, it's short, so I'll just read it real quick. It says, except where a city assessed and collected school taxes pursuant to this section prior to December 31st, 1974, reasonable expenses incurred by the city in assessing and collecting the school taxes, to the extent that those expenses are in addition to the expenses of assessing and collecting other taxes at the same time, and except as otherwise agreed to by the city and school district or intermediate school district, exceed the amount of any fee and charge imposed by the city on collection of the school taxes, shall be billed to and paid by the school board of education or intermediate school or school board. So kind of the line that stood out to me was about these being reasonable expenses to the extent that those expenses are in addition to the expenses of assessing and collecting other taxes at the same time. So from there, it was needing to understand what is the city incurring to collect taxes on our behalf. So just like we're a public entity, And we have our things shared on the website. The city also has information shared out on their website. So, in taking a look at what their costs are for their treasurer's department, it was pretty clear that we're paying a very significant portion of their cost for the treasurer's office. So with that, the school district reached out to administration and had a meeting with them. They were willing to have that conversation with us. They thought a solution could be potentially levying a 1% administrative fee on the tax bills, and if they levied that they wouldn't have to collect this fee from the school district. I don't know how in-depth that conversation went from administration to the city council, but the response we got back from administration was that the city council wasn't interested in assessing that 1% admin fee, but that we could continue those conversations maybe directly with city council. So we've been having discussions with the city council. We did that both in August and in September. And, our request has been to revisit this agreement. I don't think I started there, that we are working on an agreement that was entered into between the city and the school district back in 1994. And in that agreement, it established a base fee. And then every year, the fee would go up based on what the payroll rate of increase was for one of the employee groups within the city of Livonia. So the fee back in 1994 was in the neighborhood of maybe $282,000. And since then, over almost 30 years, it's raised to what it is today, which again for this school year is $474,000. So we've been having some, again, great discussions with the city council. We're very hopeful that we'll be able to reach a new mutually agreed upon agreement for the tax collection fees. I do believe, in looking at what the city has been able to provide to us, I think what the agreement was based on was more of a cost-sharing model where they were looking at the total cost that the city incurs to assess and collect taxes and then sharing that cost with the school district. We believe that looking at the spirit of that law is that the intent is for it to be additional costs incurred, not necessarily a cost-sharing model. So that's the direction, we'd like to see the city take with this. But again, we wanted to make our community, our school community, aware that these discussions have been taking place with city council, and we're very interested in getting something updated. So when it comes time for the tax collection for summer of 2024, we'll have a new agreement in place before those collections take place. So I'll turn it over to Ms.
That was
Oquist.
fantastic background, Mrs. Smith. As you know, this has been on our docket for a couple of years now to address this fee. We have appreciated the time that city administration and city council has spent talking with us about this. We do feel at this time, looking at our budget for this school year, that we have agreed to continue that expenditure for this year, but our anticipation is that we will need to come to a new agreement to begin next year, our next fiscal year. So we did send along to the city after the August and September conversations 4 specific questions, and so I'll share those with you now in the responses that we have gotten to date. The first question was, we inquired as to the calculation of costs for collecting school taxes only, as described in the statute, i.e. the incremental costs incurred by the city in collecting Livonia Public Schools taxes only. Specifically, quote, to the extent that those expenses are in addition to the expenses of assessing and collecting other taxes at the same time. So we were really looking for and requesting information on the above and beyond costs that are incurred by the city in order to collect Livonia Public Schools taxes. As you know, there are a number of things on the tax bill, including a tax for the DIA and a zoo tax for Wayne County RESA, taxes for Schoolcraft College, for Clarenceville, et cetera. We were looking for the specific above and beyond costs as it relates to Livonia Public Schools. Number 2, a detailed breakdown of the cost to the city for collecting all taxes. So we wanted to be able to compare those 2 numbers. The third question was, what cost savings would the city recognize if the city were not collecting taxes on behalf of Livonia Public Schools? And the fourth was information related to any fees paid by all other entities on the city tax bill, including the state of Michigan for the state education tax, the Wayne County, the Zoo Authority, the Detroit Arts Institute, Schoolcraft College, Clarenceville School District, and the Wayne County Regional Education Service Agency. So to recap, with regard to question number 1, the specific amount of above and beyond costs incurred by the city for collecting Livonia Public Schools taxes. To date, we have not received a specific amount for that cost. We did receive the answer to question 2, which was a detailed breakdown for the city for collecting all taxes. So they included not only the Treasurer's Department, but the Assessor's Department, a portion, an incremental portion of most city departments, I believe 2% of costs related to all of the other departments. And so they gave us the total cost related to tax collection. So that was the answer to our second question. It did not, unfortunately, break down the cost specific to LPS. They have shared with us, though, that the cost savings the city would recognize if they were not collecting taxes on behalf of Livonia Public Schools in the summer tax levy, that there would not be any cost savings to the city. And so by the nature of the answer to that question, we would make the assumption that the costs are negligible as far as above and beyond costs, but we would still like to be certain of that from the city so that they can confirm that. And then as we looked into any other fees paid, there is a portion of a fee paid by Schoolcraft College and by Clarenceville School District, a much smaller fee. At this point in time, Livonia Public Schools takes on the overwhelming portion of that cost, I believe about 88.7%. And so, as Mrs. Smith has shared and as we have done really extensive research over the past year and a half to 2 years, what we have found is in over 600 districts in the state, there is no other district that pays a fee similar to the fee paid by Livonia Public Schools. And so that was really something that as we began to really, as you know, we take very seriously our role as fiscal stewards. And so that was really what began that process of a formal inquiry with the city to come to a new agreement. We know that this agreement is just about 30 years old. We do feel it is time to revisit the agreement and the tenants included within. And so again, in the spirit of the law, we feel that if there were to be any costs incurred by the district, we are happy to pay for those costs that are incurred by the city on our behalf, that are indeed above and beyond those that are incurred for the tax collection for all of the entities, including the city. Again, as we looked at this and studied the 20 largest municipalities in the state, as well as all of Wayne County, we found that it is generally townships that charge a fee to their school districts. And that is based on a per parcel cost. So for every parcel of land, there is a small fee assessed. But as we looked at this and as we've worked with Clark Hill, our attorneys, we have found that paying almost $500,000 is certainly an anomaly in the entire state. There was a question, I believe, also posed during the discussions with the city as to whether or not the school district would collect their own taxes. And so we also have studied that, and we have not found another school district in the state of Michigan that collects their own taxes. So we are certainly desirous of continuing to partner with the city. It is certainly a large role of any municipality to collect those taxes from residents. And we also think that that may be burdensome to our residents and to taxpayers to have to pay two separate entities. So we feel very good that we will be able to move forward and work in concert with the city council and the city administration to come up with a new agreement, but we do certainly believe that it is time to do so. Again, looking at the importance of our fiscal stewardship, when we look at an amount that is equivalent to full funding for 52 students in the district. So 52 FTEs would be the equivalent of the amount we pay for this tax collection fee. We really begin to look at that cost burden and how those dollars could be utilized to benefit the students that we serve. And so, as you know, we are continuing to be steadfast in our efforts to come to a new agreement, but we would certainly like to open up to the Board of Education. This is the first time we've had a chance to talk about this in one of our Committee of the Whole meetings, so we thought this would be a good time to hear any feedback from you on this item and any specific direction you'd like to give us.
Mrs. Acosta.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for the thorough reporting and research that has taken place in order for us to be where we are today in this discussion. And I just wanted to say that, you know, we're always looking for ways to stand out as a district. This is not how we want to do that. This is not how we want to stand out in the state of Michigan as the district that has these excessive fees incurred. So I think I applaud your efforts in continuing to seek, I guess, a common ground with the city in terms of renegotiating this contract.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question. Mrs. Oquist or Mrs. Smith, what do we, Westland, I believe, collects some of our taxes?
do.
They not? And,
Yes.
And do you know what our fee is from the city of Westland?
We pay no fee at all to the city of Westland and have not in the past.
Okay.
They do not charge us any tax collection fee, and yes, they do collect taxes on our behalf.
Okay. Other more comments? Mrs. Burton.
Yes, this is an issue that is very, very important to me. I would like to thank Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Oquist for doing a lot of work in compiling the information, as Mrs. Acosta has said. The fact that we are the only school district in the state of Michigan that's charged a fee anywhere near this dollar amount is significant. We've talked about this off and on for at least the last 6 to 8 years. And I would like to thank our partners at the city at this point for taking us very seriously about this. This is something that at this point in time simply must be addressed. When it came to our attention that not only is it an exorbitant fee, we're the only ones in the state of Michigan that are being charged an exorbitant fee. That even got the attention of our folks who are on the receiving end of that fee. I know that that does not feel good to a lot of our friends across the street at this point either. I would like to thank our city council folks for taking us very seriously. We've had a couple of meetings now with them, and we are scheduled to have another tomorrow. I look very forward to that meeting. I would like to publicly thank them for getting this meeting rescheduled. We were scheduled some days ago for it, and a number of folks fell ill, and it had to be rescheduled on a rather short notice. So my sincere thanks for the effort that it took in the busy month of December to get this meeting rescheduled, because it is this important to us. Of significance to me is the fact that the language in this law says that we can come to another agreement, which was reached some 30 years ago by folks that are no longer with the school district. And frankly, I'm a bit baffled at how in the world they came up to the large dollar figure, even 30 years ago, to begin this agreement at $280-some thousand, and then it has grown so. No one here seems to be, including myself, seems to be able to figure out how, because that was an anomaly at the time. But we're looking at a $470,000 bill to the city of Livonia for tax collection, when the spirit of this law clearly says that the district should pay costs incurred above and beyond what it costs the city to collect taxes for all of the other entities. And there are many. We can all look at our tax bill. You see a lot of different entities on that bill each time the summer and the winter taxes are paid. We should pay any costs, according to the law, above and beyond what it costs the city to do that. real sticking point is it does not appear to cost the city much more to collect for Livonia Public Schools than it does for all of the other entities. Those properties would still have to be assessed. Those bills would have to be sent out. Those dollars would still have to be collected. There would be a cost in the transfers that I understand take place, is it 10 to 12 times per year, that we get a wire transfer of the portion of the taxes that belongs to Livonia Public Schools. As do, I'm certain, all the other entities that are involved, as Mrs. Opa said, the DIA, the zoo, the city itself for our city services, et cetera. There are a number of folks, or a number of entities on that bill. So there's a cost in transferring that money over. But other than that, no one seems to be able to give us a dollar figure on what it costs to collect to collect for Livonia Public Schools. And I believe that that is because it is negligible. It's concerning to me that if the law says, if the spirit of that law is that we're supposed to pay what it costs the city above and beyond, if that dollar figure is negligible and we're paying $472,000, we simply must come to a new agreement because this is just wrong. Again, I thank our folks on the LPS side for doing a lot of work getting to the bottom of this, and I thank our folks on the city side for taking this seriously. A number of folks I know have spent a great deal of time also studying this issue, and I'm very much looking forward to our meeting tomorrow evening to see if we can come to an agreement on a new agreement. If we can come to a new agreement on this, because what we have right now is simply, it's not fair, it's not reasonable. It feels, as a representative of the school district, like the school district is being treated, it feels to me, I'll speak for myself, it feels like we're being treated as a fundraising arm for the city. And that is not how I believe tax dollars that are allocated for education were intended to be spent. I'm speaking for myself on that commentary on that. Again, if we have 600 school districts in the state of Michigan and no one is paying anywhere near this amount of money, I'm very much looking forward to this meeting tomorrow. I'm very hopeful that we can come to a reasonable agreement.
All set?
That's it.
Thank you. And President Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Benefield. I was astounded when I heard that other districts aren't paying what we're paying. I mean, when I look at the information that you provided, you did a survey of the Wayne County school districts and the 20 largest municipalities in the state, and it reveals that the fee is our fee is significantly out of alignment with those. And it even says the majority of the school districts don't pay any fee to the municipality to collect school taxes. I mean, I was astonished to hear that, quite honestly. It's amazing that I'm sort of baffled why this agreement was even entered into 30 years ago. And you talk about the intent and the spirit of the law. We don't have to look to the intent or the spirit. We look to the specific language in the statute. Mm-hmm. That tells us what it is. Now, I will admit there's an exception if there's an agreement, but the law specifically states, it says, to the extent that those expenses are in addition to the expenses of assessing and collecting other taxes at the same time. Mm-hmm. That's very clear. It's a very clear directive that what the statute is saying and what can be done. I also agree, I want to thank Mrs. Burton for all her efforts in getting this meeting rescheduled. I know you spent a lot of time with some of the folks at the city when the meeting for last week was canceled, and I think we all appreciate the efforts that you made in getting this done. I also agree, and I thank our partners at the city that were willing to work with you to get this done. This is, in my mind, a high priority on our list. We're talking about this year paying over $500,000. That money could be going into our general fund, and that would give us how many FTEs?
52.
52 FTEs if that money were here. So I think this is of utmost importance that we get this done. And I think you need to, at that meeting, be clear that this has to be reworked and it has to be equitable and in keeping with the state statute. Thanks.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. And I just wanted to thank Mrs. Allison again for your due diligence. The work that you did and continue to do regarding this is absolutely astonishing. It's just above and beyond, so thank you for that. As a taxpayer, I find it concerning that dollars that we spend, tax dollars that we pay to the state and to the city and are directed towards the school district are, instead of being used to hire other teachers or to enhance classroom learning, are being used to pay to collect more taxes. And it's a large amount of money, 52 FTEs, that's significant. That's very concerning to me. And this is an historical cost. So even during some of our leanest years when we had to cut staff or freeze wages, we still had to pay this large amount of money, which could have been put to much better use during those years, and certainly every year as well. But as a taxpayer, I find this very concerning. And I'm really glad that we can sit down with the city and renegotiate this. I encourage you to make this a continuing priority. I think that this affects so many things that our district does. It affects our budget, it affects our classroom learning, and I can't think of any higher priority right now than working on this negotiated new agreement. The one that we have is antiquated and no longer suitable.
Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you, Mrs. Bonifield. I agree with all my colleagues. I know we've reiterated, we want to thank you, Mrs. Smith, for all of your hard work and diligence in bringing this to light. We do need a new agreement. It's, again, it's our highest priority. There's no doubt, and I am thankful that we're able to garner a meeting and to start working on this to get this a new agreement going. It's really long overdue. If you look, it's a 30-year antiquated agreement. I'm glad we're all in agreement at taking a look at it, and I do look forward to meeting with our folks across the street to garner something new and more equitable for our district. And like we said, we're all good stewards of our funding, and this is a fiscal responsible thing for us to bring over to the city for a new agreement. There's no doubt about it. So I look forward to tomorrow.
Mrs. Frank?
Thank you, Mrs. Bonifield. I agree with all my colleagues, and I also want to thank my colleagues on the Board of Education for making this a priority, because I think what we are tasked with in some of our what we do as a Board of Education is set our budget. And when we look at our budget, and set our budget to align with our priorities, and when we set policy and that sort of thing, this is something that we need to look at that's not aligned with our priorities, with our student enhancement. And so we need to look at this, and what has been done in the past, we need to reevaluate. And I'm just thankful to all of you for staying steady in this, for it has been it has been discussed in my first term. And so now coming back, I'm so thankful that it's still on the docket, and we're really trying to get some resolution to this. So I think thanks for the persistence of the Board of Education to seek a resolution to this, and somehow we can relieve our budget from this tax or this fee that we've been doing. But I think it's really a highest priority of any Board of Education is to set the budget and make sure the budget aligns with our priorities. So thanks for all of your work as well as the administration's work.
So I'll take my turn since everybody else is gone. I think when, we hear, and I understand that we're generalizing it about $500,000. We're a little bit under. In the next couple of years, we will hit that mark. So I apologize up front. When we generalize at $500,000, we have a more accurate number than that. I think when we talk about $500,000, that's a lot of money. And we know that the city has an operating budget, and for as much as it means to us to have that $500,000, when we first started talking about that, I'm like, how are we gonna, how's the city gonna deal with it on their side, right? Now they're gonna be short $500,000 that we're providing. I think, first of all, I agree with everyone that if we look at how this is taken care of across the state of Michigan, we are not in an equitable position as to other school districts. It's done differently. We are an anomaly, as has been pointed out. But in our discussions, we have also learned that there is the ability for the city. We are not necessarily leaving them with a $500,000 hole in their budget. They have a mechanism to be able to assess a up to 1% fee for tax collection, which they can add, I believe, at their discretion, correct?
Correct.
And I think it's been calculated that the added fee would be a quarter of a percent added to each tax bill would cover, more than cover the $500,000 that would be left as a hole in their budget, should we change our agreement to pay less than the $500,000. So I think that because we're not, I was, at first I was concerned, how are we gonna get this done? We're gonna leave this huge hole in the city budget, which they absolutely have the mechanism to resolve. So I don't feel like our request is going to short the city or dip into their budget. They have the mechanism. We've asked them about that mechanism, and I personally talked to many of during the election season, the city council members and potential members over the election season, and they are extremely resistant to making any changes to the city taxes. And I struggle with that on a number of issues. I guess I'm going down a rabbit hole. But I guess the point is that this isn't gonna affect our police force, or it doesn't have to affect our police force or any of our city services, that they have the mechanism to replace this and potentially add to their budget by adding the 1% fee to their to the tax bills. Okay. Anybody else? Additions, rebuttals? Mrs. Acosta.
I wanted to also say thank you, right, to our colleagues, my colleagues at the table, for all their work that they've done in the past, and to get us here today in the sense that we are meeting, we are, both across the street and us, we are having those opportunities to have further discussion. I just wanted to point out that we have, as a district, continued to pay this exorbitant fee, knowing that this was way outside of what we should be expecting, because we are trying to be good partners in the city that we love. And so I'm hoping that the next time that we come together, that we see that same reciprocated.
Okay.
All right, I think we have our direction. So as you know, we are planning to meet tomorrow evening, and so hopefully we'll be able to have a good update for you in January.
Okay. And that then concludes the finance portion of our meeting tonight, President Johnson.
Thank you, Mrs. Battlefield. We will now go to item 5, our curriculum committee, and our chair, Mrs. Acosta.
Thank you, President Johnson. And we have item 5A, index scores with Mrs. O'Brien.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This out. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am happy to be here this evening to share with you our first of 3 accountability measures from the state of Michigan, our index scores. Our index scores came out about a week ago publicly, and I'm going to spend some time walking through the makeup of our index scores. I gave you a 2-page example of one of our schools that made some great growth in their index scores, and then the last 2 pages are each one of our schools' dashboard for the index scores. So if you remember, index scores is one of our accountability measures that identifies 8 specific areas that each school has a target for. And we look at what percent of that school's, whatever data, whether it's state data, whether it's attendance data, hits that target. And our index scores are updated each year based on the previous spring's MSTEP scores. And all of our schools made great growth over last year. So when I was here just 12 months ago sharing this, one of the things we were missing in our index scores last year for the 21-22 school year was a growth measure, because we didn't utilize any data from the pandemic years. So that growth measure is back in as a part of our index scores this year. So a lot of our schools fell from pre-pandemic to last year being the first year with index scores, and all of our schools except 2 have come back to pre-pandemic index scores and above from where we were. And if you remember, when our MSTEP scores came out, we've made some great growth in our index scores, and 2 of the biggest measures in our index scores is proficiency on state assessments and growth on state assessments. And so it makes sense that our schools have made some great improvements within this particular measure. So there's an overall score, that's the top left score, that's the overall index, and it is made up of all of the other scores. The one to the right is a support category. If you have an identified area that you did not hit the target and were significantly below, or a subgroup that was significantly below, you would be identified as comprehensive support or targeted support, and we have no schools that are either one of those. So all of our schools are universal support. The second row is our growth index score, and that is based on growth from state assessments, and we have a target that we need to meet. Each school has a set target that they the state has a target, and then it's broken down by each year to hit that target. I'll give you a little bit more information on that in a minute. A proficiency score, so again, there's a state target that we're trying to hit with proficiency, and a school's percent of hitting that target is listed there. Graduation rates, if it's an elementary index score, they won't have those. Our secondary high schools have those. Our English learner progress index score, you would need to have 30 students who are identified as English learners in order to have a score there. Not all of our schools do. The last row is that school quality and student success index score, and that is made up of the percent of students not chronically absent, that we offer phys ed and arts, that we have K-8 media specialists, that we offer 11 through 12 advanced grades 11 and 12 advanced coursework, our post-secondary enrollment, and those all equal that school quality and student success index. And then participation rates is the final section on the far right at the bottom. And that is 2% of the overall school score is participation on state assessments. And then if you have those 30 students who are English language learners, that you would need to have 95% for them. That's the target for participation. So this year, the state has looked back at last year's score and reset some of their state targets. So first time we've had some growth data and looking at, so where is our next iteration of index scores? So they've reset our targets. Some have been increased, some have been decreased. One particular area is math has been decreased in the state target. So if I am the principal of Buchanan Elementary, I am trying to hit that state target of ELA is 57.92%. So they take my score and they say, so you should grow this certain percent every year. Between now and 2032 is when the index scores have been shared out. So a little bit less than 10 years out. So I took one of our schools that made great growth. So on the right is their index dashboard for this year. So their overall index was 80.8. Last year's was 62.5. This school made great growth in both reading and math and M-STEP. And so I just wanted to kind of walk you through a little bit. On the bottom half of this is their growth overview. And so we not only look at the overall all students' growth on state assessments, but also each one of those subgroups, how they did both in ELA math. So that growth target is the combination of our ELA scores and our math scores. And so you can see that this school more than, is on their way of hitting those state targets because 93% just on that growth score of their students hit that target. On the backside is their proficiency, not as high. So last year, again, we made lots of great growth across the district, but our proficiency isn't where we are wanting it to be. But if you look along the right side of that breakdown, I just put some of the last year's proficiency targets. So all students on proficiency, combined ELA and math, grew almost 12%. Some of our subgroups grew from 42% to 47%, from 60% to 83%. And so it's just an example for you to see some of the math that the state utilizes when they're doing this accountability measure. That school quality and student success overview, so that chronic absenteeism, so that's students who miss 10% or more. So what they report in the index score is the percent of students who are not chronically absent. And the target for that previously was 92% of students being not chronically absent. Well, the state has noticed that we are having an absentee problem in the state of Michigan across the nation since COVID, that people are not attending school with the same focus and, wanting their students to be there and get 100% attendance. And so they've dropped that state target, as you can see on that page. In addition to that, our students have access to PE and art, a media specialist, K-8, and then obviously this is an elementary school, so they don't have that coursework. But underneath, I just did the percentages for the arts and the PE, and just so that you could see the breakdowns for those. And then the last 2 pages is each one of our schools' scores for this particular year. And so I just wanted to give you a minute to look at those and if you had any questions about those. Ms. Acosta.
Mrs. Burton?
Is chronically absent, am I remembering correctly that it's defined as 10 days or more per school year?
10%.
10% of the school days.
18 days over the
18
year.
days, okay. So clearly, that's the only thing with it that, that's the only portion of that needle that we can really significantly move in the quality category. Because we have all the other boxes checked off.
Correct.
I mean, we
Yep.
offer the AP courses,
Yep.
we have the media specialist in all of the buildings, et cetera. And obviously, attending school has a direct relationship to success in school.
Correct.
And to proficiency in school and so forth. What types of things are we doing, especially at the, well, I'll ask specifically at the elementary level right now, in order to encourage our students to attend school
So
very regularly?
we have noticed this change since COVID, and it's been a part of our principal meetings. We are finishing up first trimester at elementary. We're looking and pulling. Mr. Hillard brings a report each month of how many students are chronically absent. So now we're culminating that into first trimester, first quarter for secondary, and then setting specific targets at our building levels with the principals about how we support our families to get their students to school. So our attendance system sends out an email to a parent that if a student has missed, that they need to come in and talk to the principal. So we have many different layers of support for families, but it's that one-to-one contact. It's knowing who those students are, that if a particular family has a reason that they're not attending, that we're supportive of that. But if they don't, if there's ways to get, there's ways they need support to get their student to school. When I was a principal, I drove and picked up kids who parents said, so she won't get out of bed. I said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I'll come bring her to school and have a conversation about how important it is for her to be there. So our principals do a great job of this. It's a new data point that we're really in-depthly looking at monthly, and then at our quarterly, we're getting a culmination of where we're at.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
To piggyback on what Mrs. Burton said, so does this take into account excused absences, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. I know
It takes
that-
into account all absences.
All absences.
Because we know, I think the post-pandemic as parents, I know when my kid is sick, I'm like really hesitant to send him before we just tell him to rub dirt on it and go back to school. And now we're a little more cautious about sending them sick. And so I just wonder if that plays any role.
It does. And, I think that's why schools, knowing families and contacting them and having conversations with us, EST supporting families, so that we know where they're at and some of the reasons when their students start to miss too many days, so that we could help support them with that.
And I will say, this is a widespread issue within our county and within our state. That's certainly not to excuse us needing to make every effort on this. I will say across the country, Michigan has the fourth highest rate of absenteeism across the country, based on post-pandemic attendance at school. In Wayne County, I know we've talked about this with our Wayne County Superintendent Group, and we are seeing this as a significant issue of concern. Both Mr. Etu, our Director of Secondary Programs, and Mr. Green, our Director of Elementary Programs, have spent time specifically with their school leaders, principals, assistant principals, counselors, et cetera, to really delve into this and to determine what are the things that we need to do. One, to not only encourage regular attendance, and you've probably seen us increase in the communications out from our district. We've tried to give some statistics about the impact that it has on a student's learning when they miss those 18 days or more, and cumulatively over the course of 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, what percentage of their education that they're missing. And we know that that is really difficult to make that time up and recreate those those rich discussions that take place, the opportunity to get support and help. And so it really is working individually with families to determine what support they need. We do see that some students got into some habits of not being at school during the pandemic and during that portion of time, even though we were back in person. Really, that mental model of a lower threshold for staying home, not having the stamina for school, we really thought that would abate at this point, and it really has not to the extent that we would like it to. Not only for this, certainly we want to continue to see these index scores rise, but most importantly because we need them here. We want them here for their learning, for their mental health supports, and so it is a challenge we are seeing across our county and across our state. I don't know that there is an educational conference that you could go to right now that would not have this as a focus. So it's really a great question and a great follow-up question, and I do know that our members of our cabinet team are zeroed in on this, and we'd really like to see an impact. We also need our parents' help with getting our kiddos here each day.
Thank you. Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you. And piggybacking on that, I'm wondering, in addition to the health issues, parents, like I said, a child has a sniffle and they're keeping them home due to the germ factor. Parents now have that ability to work from home. So I wonder if that plays a piece in this, where before a parent would be going into the office, so there would be nobody home. And if they're working from home, I think a lot of times they might be more willing to have their child stay at home and not make school a priority because they themselves are working out of the home. So there is a parent or somebody there. So those things I think also may come into play as far as why they're not getting to school, or like you said, the habits of, I just want to stay home, and a parent might say, oh, okay, you can stay home today. But you're absolutely right. It's so important for these kids to be in school every single day, and we need to make our efforts to get them there as much as we can to get them.
And I really do want to give a shout out to our school leaders and our staff who are working diligently on this. I know I was part of a conversation listening in on a meeting Mr. Etu had earlier this year with the administrators as they really brainstormed and talked about the individual outreach that they do when they see students on a path to chronic absenteeism and meeting face-to-face with a parent and a student and really talking about the impact of this. So we know we have committed leaders out there who want to see this change, and so we will continue to study some creative ways to communicate this to parents, as well as those individual efforts being taken at a school level.
And I just want to add to that it does make an impact. All the mailers, not mailers, we're not doing those anymore, but the emails, actually there was a letter that came, I know I'm putting my business out there, but it allows parents to then say, hey, the school's noticing you have to go. You cannot miss because of, whatever it is. Rescheduling dentist appointments or whatever. So it is helpful to parents to then enforce that at home when there's communication coming home that we can use to confirm that this is an issue.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Thanks. Just going back, I know we talked about absenteeism, but looking at these documents, it's really encouraging. I think this is really, to me, it's encouraging to see the growth index and the overall index scores trending upward. I'm really proud of all the work that our staff has done, our teachers, post-pandemic, to really get the academics going and working toward these goals. Because, people look at these school indexes and they want to see what's happening in each individual school and what's happening in our district. And while this is just one measure, that's so important because as we know, our school communities are so awesome and wonderful. so proud of all the work that everybody does every day. But this is a nice piece to celebrate that we are trending in the right direction. So it's good to see this.
Yes, I agree.
Mrs. Frank?
Just on the back, I think we're missing Franklin.
Who are we missing?
Yes,
Franklin.
Franklin's
It's
missing.
Churchill, Stevenson, and then I think
Yeah,
we just
Frank.
I'm
need
so
Twice.
sorry.
Franklin. That's okay.
Oh,
It's okay. Just sometime. But I did want to just briefly touch base. I don't want to just labor the point of the absenteeism, but I am thankful that our district has prioritized mental health and really spent some dollars putting psychologists in the buildings and really, because I do think that that has an impact on attendance. And I think what Mrs. Oquist said about kids' stamina, and they're not used to being around that many kids all day, still several years into it, but they're not being used to it. They don't know how to handle the social situations that come, whether it's in kindergarten or 12th grade. Sometimes it just feels overwhelming. And so I think one of the things that we could do, I love the new communication that we're sending out. It's important to have your kids here. We love having your kids here. But I think kids think it's all on Google Classroom. I can just get it anyway, and I don't have to miss anything, and don't realize the importance of actually being in the classroom. And two, I think that we can send some communications out that say, if you're struggling, here's who to call. If you're struggling with getting your kid to school, if your kid is having emotional struggles, please call. I know there's always a counseling number, please call, but I don't think we think, my kid won't go to school in the morning. Are they sick? Are they what? But here's a number to call because, right, Teresa, had you not come to that parent's house, sometimes the parent is struggling, like how do I get them to school?
Sure.
And so I think for parents to say here's a resource that if you're struggling and your kid feels overwhelmed at the beginning of the day, here's some options for you to do. And I just think that kind of communication, we do need our parents, but we need to partner with them to give them just some resources to say, here's some ways that we can work through this together. But I'm really encouraged by these scores, and I love when we talk about scores and how our kids are doing, because I think that is so vital to our role as a Board of Education. And to see these kids, this is 4 pieces of paper, but this is an awful lot of work that you have done to compile it, but what teachers have done, what staff has done, what our team has done to change curriculum, to get great curriculum, and to provide layers of support. So it's really exciting. So thank you for bringing it to us.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. This is great. I'm a data junkie, so I love this. And my questions are, did I hear you say that the absentee is a new metric?
No.
The absentee rate?
Nope. It's part of the school quality student success
Okay, good.
section.
And also, can you do sheets like this for the other buildings?
Sure.
I would love to see data like this, particularly for the schools that piloted our project Lead the Way, and see if there's, if we have a measurable impact for that program.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Oh.
So next month, I'll be bringing our grade report cards, our ABC accountability, and then I'll be bringing our annual education reports.
Oh, Mrs. Burton?
This is some of the My School data, so this is accessible to
Everyone.
Everyone in the state of Michigan, not
Correct.
just parents, not just in your district, anyone can. And if anyone wanted to access that, they go to My School, is it myschooldata.org?
myschooldata.org under K-12, and then school accountability. You can also just look at scores under proficiency reports. And so you get something similar in the parent dashboard, but this particular one is under school accountability under K-12.
Okay. And for our district, is this on our website? Under our transparency? No, or would they?
I can link it.
Okay. Okay.
Clarification, when you say my school, is it M-I?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, just
Thank
so
you.
that
Yep.
anybody who's out there listening,
Yes.
I'll try and go
Thank you.
M-Y
Uh-huh.
school.
Nope, very
MI
good.
is in
Very
Michigan.
good. Michigan school data, MI.
Good catch, President
I
Johnson.
read stuff.
Thank you so much, Mrs. O'Brien, for this valuable report. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that
Don't go away.
concludes our curriculum committee report.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. That takes us to item 6, our policy committee, and I'll turn it over to our chair, Mrs. Frank.
Thank you, President Johnson. We have one policy to go over tonight. Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien, for staying here and taking us through this.
We're going to have Mr.
I'm going to bring my friend Mr. Etu up also.
Yes.
Mr. E2.
Hello, hello.
We are bringing to you Board Policy IHF. It is Instructional Programs Graduation Requirements. And we are going to bring this to you twice in the next couple of months. We're going to start with the science requirement change. And then when we have solidified all of the personal finance law that has been passed, that our current 8th graders need to get a half credit in personal finance, we will update the board policy again and make sure it looks the way we want it to look and represents how we're going to utilize that credit. So we're still planning on embedding it in economics, but wanted to make sure we have all our Ts crossed and all our Is dotted when we add that to our board policy. So tonight's board policy, we're just making some small changes with some updated titles and verbiage. So in the first section, it says arrangements are necessary, may be approved by the principals, and we added with the support of the Director of Secondary Programs. That was not there. Section 2, we took out the word successfully, because if a student earned the credits, then they've successfully earned the credits, so we don't need that word. Section 3, we changed the title of my department. It was Office of Instruction, and now it is the Academic Services Department, but the rest of that section stands. Common Learnings. So this is the section that lays out our students' core credits they need to earn. So the ELA, Section A, Language Arts, we've just, probably 5 years ago, moved to Language Arts 11 and Language Arts 12 instead of the 2 semester-long courses that we used to offer. So that's just a name change. It's already something in our day-to-day business. Our mathematics section is the same. It is our science section that we are proposing a change to our board policy. Currently, students in Livonia are required to take biology, chemistry, and physics. In the state of Michigan, the state requirement is biology and a choice of chemistry or physics and a 3rd year of science. And knowing that our students are headed off to learn and do things that maybe jobs that haven't existed yet, we want to provide them more opportunities to take science courses that they're interested in, and more opportunities to just open up their pathways and thinking in terms of science. We are planning on making this change for our seniors. So our current juniors, who will be seniors next year. Mr. E2 and I have talked to all of the schools, and there's several students that could benefit from having the choice next year as seniors, and we want to make that an opportunity for them. And so it would begin with the class of 2025. And then the rest of the requirements are the same, other than just some word changes with how world language was written 10 years ago. It said a unit of the same world language, but if they're only taking one, so we just changed it to a unit of a world language and the completion of a career technical education program, or a unit of a world language and 1 unit of VPAA in addition to the required VPAA credits.
I was just going to highlight a change that Mrs. Bradford mentioned at our last meeting, that on under F, visual performing and or applied arts, that there be a parentheses
Oh.
VPAA.
You are correct. Thank you so much.
Mrs. Acosta.
I will have that for the regular board meeting reading.
Any other questions? Mrs. Burton?
Couple of things. Number one, thank you for being proactive and making sure this is allowable for next year's seniors. I know that was something we just talked about in a study session, and I appreciate you following up on that and making sure that you guys found a way to make that happen for those kids. Even if it's a handful, to those handful, it's important. So thank you, I appreciate it. A question on the world language. When it's 2 units of the same world language, is that a state requirement that it be the same world language, or is that an LPS?
State.
It is a state thing, okay. And then one unit of a world language. So am I reading that correctly, saying as the second option, if it says 1 unit of a world language, that would mean they could take 1 semester of French and 1 semester of Spanish, the way that's written, correct?
Nope, it would be 1 year.
It'd be 1 year, the same language.
So, because it's written as a unit, I would think
It's 1 year.
1 year, where if you look at 0.5 unit personal fitness, 0.5 unit of health, that equals the 1 unit of physical education. So this is written to say 1 year, 1 unit of world language, and then a completion of a career technical education
Okay.
program.
We may need to tweak the verbiage then, so that the 1 unit is of the same world language.
Or 1 year of a world language, 1 year of a world language?
Do you follow me?
I think
I understand what you mean, I understand, I think we're all saying the same thing.
Same thing, different
They-
ways.
Exactly.
You might want to say same again, right? Because
Well, up at the top where it says credit requirements, it says 1 unit equals 1 credit.
Right, but my point is, 1 unit of world language could also technically be 1 semester of French and 1 semester of Spanish, and that's not our intention.
So if we left the way it was written,
Mm-hmm,
1 unit of the same world
Yep.
language.
yep.
yeah.
Yeah, but isn't a unit
unit is a
1
year.
right?
It is.
So you can't, you have to take 1
You have to-
unit of a world language.
No.
If you took two, if you took
2
2
semesters.
semesters, that would be 0.5 units and 0.5 units.
Mhm. Correct. But the way this is written, a student could take 1 semester of French and 1 semester of Spanish, but our intention, and the intention of the state of Michigan, is that it be 2 semesters of either French or Spanish. So I agree with that, we need to leave the same in there if that's our intention.
What if we said 1 unit of 1 world language?
I think it's cleaner just to have it the way it was.
Same.
And
Because you
Colleen,
have
Of
are
the
you,
same
above,
world
but you
language.
have the same above.
Mhm.
That's true.
are you not thinking 2 credit requirements, a minimum of 23 units of credit, 1 unit equals 1 credit must be earned? That doesn't,
No, because my point is,
right.
for the second option, for the first option, we're clear. 2 units of the same world language. Got it. That's 2 straight years of, pick your language, but you do it for 2 years. For options 2 and 3, by dropping the same, we've potentially, by the way it's written, we've allowed a student to take 1 semester of each of 2 languages, and that's not our intention. So I would prefer that we leave of the same in the verbiage of options 2 and 3.
Are we assuming that's our intention, or is that our intention?
Our intention is the same,
Is the same?
yeah.
Okay.
Either French or,
Spanish or Japanese or
Okay.
whatever they're,
And then I agree with Mrs. Bird.
okay.
Okay. So everybody wants 1 unit of the same world language and the completion of a career and technical program.
And the same in the next line.
Yeah.
1 unit
Okay.
of the same world language.
Okay.
Bullet 2 and bullet 3.
Okay.
Okay, and then, not necessarily for this revision, especially because we are going to be revising this again for personal fitness, but when we revise for personal fitness,
personal finance.
I'm sorry, personal finance, thank you. Brain wasn't working there. Can we put something in here acknowledging the option to test out? Again, from the conversation you and I had, Mrs. O'Brien, specifically what triggered it was the world language. For a student that comes from a home that speaks English as a second language and something else as another language as a first language, they've really fulfilled this obligation. But with this entire, and that's just one example, with this entire document, we don't acknowledge test out at all, but yet.
Next page.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get there.
Number 8.
Ah, thank you.
You're welcome. It is important
I
that
didn't
it's
get that
here,
far.
that it's listed here.
Okay, give me a second here.
Sure.
That should work. Thank you.
You're
That
welcome.
was-
Thank you.
That does it. Thank
And
you.
also, when this document is posted, and I know that was your intent, Mrs. Burton had asked for a link to the equivalents. And so I think where you have in parentheses under math, where it says or an equivalent, we had talked about that being a live link to that paragraph you had showed us at the bottom
Yep.
that indicated all of the equivalencies for Algebra 2.
Any other questions?
No, but thank you very much for, I know I've asked some very detailed, very pressing questions on this.
We
And I'm a
appreciate
little bit
that.
of a policy freak, and this is one of them. So thank you for your patience with me.
And this is kind of the detail stuff that you're talking about that isn't really policy, but just the spacing after the periods, it should just be one.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes.
Thoughts, Mrs. Burton?
Michigan Merit Curriculum, I'm reading the test out section again. A Michigan Merit Curriculum course is foreign language one of the Michigan Merit Curriculum courses? Okay,
It's required that they take 2 years
okay.
of world
I wasn't sure if that was,
Or-
okay.
Or,
So basically, everything under the common learnings is going to be Michigan
Is it
Merit Curriculum?
correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
The only other one, we didn't talk about the change in paragraph 6.
Correct.
Provided in required high school core courses.
Right. We move the word required in front of high school core
Right.
courses instead of high school core required courses.
Right, right.
And
Okay.
item 10, the very last word.
Capital.
Superintendent.
Capital S.
Perfect. Anything else on policy, on that policy?
So-
IHF?
Are we bringing this for a first reading? Okay, and then we'll modify it again
Correct.
down the road.
So we're going
Okay.
to do 2 readings so that it's in place. So we are going to communicate the change to our 8th graders going to 9th grade. But since they won't take economics, I want to make sure we have everything in place for them. But we'll let parents know as they do their course selection that this will be a change, that it will be embedded in economics, this new requirement from the state. And then the work of what that looks like, sounds like, we'll do.
Which feels much less complicated to do it separately, you know, just to, let's get this done.
Right.
And then even if we have to
Do
do
it
it
again.
next month,
Instead of
if you're ready next
A
month.
class of 25,
Yeah.
this, and then a class.
Yes.
Yes,
Right.
yeah, I agree.
That was a great idea to separate those two out.
And then the administrative procedures won't go to the board meeting because we don't typically do that, but we just made the change for number 2. All alumni will be charged $5 a copy for transcript fees. So just thought we'd update that while we were here.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. That wraps up
Thank
the
you.
policy.
Thank you both. That'll take us to item 7, Legislative Committee, and our chair, Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. We have no items on the Legislative Committee agenda tonight. Mrs. O'Quist?
We do not.
Very good. That takes us to item 8, our Personnel Committee, and our chair, Mrs. Bradford.
Thank you, President Johnson. We do not have anything on the agenda for this evening. Correct, Mrs. O'Quist?
You are correct.
Thank you.
Wonderful. That then brings us to the end of our agenda tonight. I want to thank all those who hung in there with us for a 3-hour meeting and we'll just say good evening. Thank you.